Welcome back to Cosmic Wand, where the wand work runs a little darker and the love stories have teeth. Today's adventure, Wednesday Addams and Fleur both claimed Harry and turned Hogwarts into their battlefield. If you haven't already, smash that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a story. Settle in, wands ready. Now let's begin. Chapter 1, The Arrivals. The dead swift had been arranged. Harry crouched over it in the guttering wandlight and knew that much before he knew anything else. Birds struck the castle glass sometimes. The towers confused them, the reflected sky drew them in, and every so often one of them broke its neck against a pane and dropped where it fell. This one had not fallen. It lay on the stone sill of the sealed corridor with its wings folded flat against its body and its head turned neatly to the left, both black feet crossed at the ankle like a sleeper's. Someone had tidied it. Someone had made it decent. There was no one down here but him. He straightened up and let the cold work its way through his jumper, which it did without hurry, the way water finds a low place. The lower levels of Hogwarts had always run chill. This was different. This was the kind of cold that arrived with a purpose and settled in for the winter, and it had not been here 3 days ago when the reconstruction crews first cracked the seal on the old Undercroft passage and let daylight into stone that had not seen it in centuries. "You're doing the face again," said Ron from the top of the steps. "What face? The one where you found a dead thing and decided it's a conspiracy." Ron came down carefully, a coil of measuring twine over one shoulder and a lantern in his fist that threw his shadow up the wall in a long swaying column. He looked at the Swift. He looked at it for a while. "All right," he admitted. "That's a bit much. Nobody's been through this door since Tuesday. Nobody's supposed to have been." Ron nudged the Swift with the toe of his boot, then thought better of it and stepped back. "You want me to get someone? I want you to hold the light steady." Harry ran 2 fingers along the sill an inch above the bird, not touching it, reading the air as he'd been taught to read a room before a fight. The cold thickened where his hand passed, then loosened, then thickened again, and there was a note under it he had no word for, Swedish and wrong, like flowers left too long in a vase. He drew his hand back. "There. You feel that?" Ron held his palm out and grimaced. "Feels like a draft. It's not a draft. It's the middle of a castle we spent all summer taking apart and putting back together, mate. Half of it's held up with scaffolding and the other half's held up with hope. Of course it's cold and weird, that's the whole job." But Ron didn't lower his hand, and he didn't look away from the Swift, and when a draft that genuinely was a draft came sighing up the passage from the sealed dark below, he flinched before he could stop himself and then pretended he hadn't. Harry crouched again and looked at the seal instead of the bird. Reconstruction crews had cracked it on Tuesday, a slab of old stone graven with worn wards that predated the founder's own hands, and they had braced the passage, declared it structurally sound, and gone home for tea because that was the job. Nobody read the wards. Nobody was paid to read the wards. He had read them because he could not help himself, and they had turned out to be not a door but a lid, and there was a difference, and the difference was the whole of his unease. A door keeps people out. Lid keeps something in. He had spent a war being the thing that other people opened doors to survive. He was tired of doors. He had asked for the reconstruction detail precisely because it was stone and mortar and nobody died of a badly pointed wall. And here, 11 weeks in, the one job he had taken to get away from the smell of old dread had gone and produced some of its own, laid out neat on a windowsill with its feet crossed. "You're doing the maths," Ron said. "I can hear you doing the maths. Whatever it adds up to, it can wait till after the feast, because if you're late, McGonagall will do to you what she did to that governor last week, and I'd like to keep you. McGonagall wants us up top anyway. The carriages are coming in, both of them. Both. Beauxbatons and the American lot. Concord Year officially begins tonight. Everyone smiles for the paintings." Ron finally did lower his hand. "You're going to have to come up and be Harry Potter at people again." "I'm always Harry Potter at people." "Yeah, but tonight there's a schedule for it." Harry looked once more at the bird. He did not move it. Some instinct he had learned the hard way told him that whoever had laid it out like that had done it as a message, and that moving the message before he understood it would be a mistake. He conjured a thin cord of light and looped it across the mouth of the passage, a tripline that would sing to his wand if anything crossed it, and he turned his back on the cold with the particular effort it took to turn his back on something that was watching. "Fine," he said, "let's go be a spectacle." They came up out of the reconstruction like men coming out of a mine, blinking into the noise of the entrance hall. It smelled of beeswax and cut cedar and the green wet of a Scottish evening blowing through the open doors. Every torch had been lit. Someone had strung the banners of 3 schools from the gallery, Hogwarts crimson between Beauxbatons blue and a third that Harry did not know, a black field with a single silver bird on it, wings spread, beak open in what might have been a song and might have been a scream. Students packed the stairs 3 deep in their good robes and craned toward the doors, and above them all on the first landing stood Headmistress McGonagall in tartan and severity, hands folded, watching the courtyard with the expression of a woman who had agreed to host 2 foreign delegations and expected to regret it precisely as much as she had predicted. "There you are," she said without turning her head as Harry came up beside her. "You have cobwebs in your hair, Potter." "Have cobwebs in your hair on the one evening the international press has been invited into my entrance hall. I've been in the Undercroft, Professor. I am aware of where you have been. You have the look of a man who has been somewhere he was told to survey and not to explore." She did turn then a fraction, and her eyes went over him with the swift accuracy of someone who had watched him grow up and knew all his tells. "What did you find?" "A dead bird," Harry said, "laid out like a funeral. And a cold that doesn't move like cold." McGonagall was quiet. Below them the crowd surged. The first of the carriages had come through the gates. "After the feast," she said, "you will show me. Until then you will keep it to yourself, and you will keep your face pleasant, because I have spent a great deal of political capital convincing the governors that this castle is a safe place to send other people's children, and I would take it as a personal kindness if you did not visibly disagree with me in front of them. I'll do my best to look reassuring. You will do better than your best. You are the most reassured about person in Britain. Deploy it." And then, so quietly that he nearly missed it under the noise, "It is good to have you standing up here and not down there, Potter. That is not a small thing. Do not make me regret saying it." The Beauxbatons carriage came first, the great powder-blue coach drawn by its team of palominos the size of drays, and the crowd made the sound crowds make it beautiful things arriving. Harry watched the door of it open and a folding step come down, and he watched the delegation descend in their pale silks, and in the middle of them, half a head taller than the girls she shepherded and moving as though the cold and the crowd and the whole vast stone weight of the castle were things she had personally decided to permit, came Fleur Delacour. He had not known she was coming until a week ago. The letter had been very Fleur about it, 3 lines, no wasted courtesy. "I am told you helped put the walls back up. I am coming to help teach people not to knock them down again. Try not to be tiresome." He had read it 4 times and laughed once, which was 3 more reads and 1 more laugh than most of his correspondents got. She found him on the landing before McGonagall had finished the first sentence of her welcome. Across the whole crowded hall her eyes came up and landed on him, and something in her face eased, and she inclined her head the precise degree that meant "here you are," and did not mean anything smaller. Wednesday's carriage came second, and it did not make the crowd make a beautiful sound. It came without horses. That was the first thing. It came drawn by nothing at all, a long black coach lacquered so dark it seemed to drink the torchlight off the walls as it passed, and it stopped in the courtyard with the finality of a coffin lid. No footman jumped down. The door opened itself unhurried, and out of it stepped a girl in black with 2 black braids and a face composed into an expression of such total, level indifference that half the entrance hall stopped breathing on reflex. She was not tall. She did not need to be. She came up the courtyard steps at a pace that suggested she had never once in her life hurried for anyone and did not intend to begin, and the crowd on the stairs peeled back from the doorway ahead of her without deciding to, the way a field of grass peels back from a cold front. On her shoulder rode nothing. In her right hand, riding along beside her at the level of her hip, walked a severed hand upright on its fingers, keeping her pace exactly. "Blimey," said Ron with feeling. The girl in black stopped just inside the doors. She looked up at the strung banners, the crimson and the blue and the black with its screaming silver bird, and her gaze traveled over the crowd with the unhurried thoroughness of someone taking inventory of a room she might need to leave quickly. Faces flinched away from her as her attention crossed them. Students found other places to look. The whole shining, nervous, overdressed press of Concord Year discovered all at once that it did not want to be seen by her, and arranged itself accordingly, and she moved her attention across all of it and found it wanting. And then her eyes reached the landing and reached Harry and stopped. He did not look away. He was not sure why. Everyone else in the hall had made the animal calculation and lost, and he understood the impulse, but when her flat, dark gaze arrived on him, it did not feel like being inspected. It felt like being recognized. She looked at him as a reader looks at the one interesting book in a room full of ornaments, and he looked back at her as he did anything that might be a threat and might be a friend and had not yet decided which. And for a moment that went on a beat too long, the two of them simply regarded one another across the heads of 100 people who wished neither of them would. "Welcome," said McGonagall into the silence, in the voice that had ended arguments in that hall for 40 years, "to Hogwarts." The girl in black inclined her head a precise half-inch. "You have a wanting in your foundations," she said. Her voice was low and level and carried without effort to every corner of the stone. "In the west and below I could smell it from the gate." She let that settle over the assembled delegations of 3 magical schools like frost over a garden. "I assume that is the surprise you have planned for us. It's very hospitable. Nobody ever puts on a real welcome anymore." "Thank you," said McGonagall without missing a beat. "Miss Addams, we do try." They filed into the great hall under a ceiling doing its best. The enchantment had taken damage in the war and never fully knit, so the stars came and went in patches, whole constellations dropping out and returning, and the effect over the 4 long tables was of a sky being remembered by someone who was almost sure of it. The 3 delegations sat mixed by McGonagall's decree, which meant Beauxbatons silk beside Hogwarts wool beside the black of the Nevermore contingent, everyone arranged into an integration that fooled no one. The Beauxbatons students clustered around Fleur like filings around a lodestone. The Nevermore students clustered around no one, being the sort of children who did not cluster, and gave the room the same evaluating once-over their transfer had, and found it, collectively, adequate. Harry ended up between Hermione and Ron, which was where he ended up whenever the world got strange, having learned over 7 years that it was the safest seat in any hall. She named it, Hermione said under the noise, not looking up from the parchment she had already produced from somewhere and begun annotating. The thing in the foundations. She walked in the door and named it. Harry, do you know what a wanting is? Because I don't, and I have read the restricted section twice, and I don't like not knowing what a person means when they say a word like that in a voice like that. She said people who think they know are the ones it eats first. That is a horrible thing to say and also good methodology, which is the most annoying combination. Hermione's quill stopped. I'm going to like her, aren't I? I can feel it happening, and I resent it. Down the table, the severed hand had climbed up onto the wood beside a black place setting and was helping itself to the bread, tearing a roll into precise pieces and arranging them by size. 2 second years across from it had stopped eating entirely and achieved a kind of religious stillness. Thing, indifferent to its audience, buttered a piece for its mistress and set it by her plate, and Wednesday accepted the offering without comment and without looking, the way a general accepts a report. That's a hand, said Ron. That's a hand doing table service. I'm going to need everyone to acknowledge that's a hand. It's called Thing, said a dreaming voice on Ron's other side, and Luna leaned around him with her radish earrings swinging and her enormous eyes fixed on the far end of the table in frank delight. It's very old and very loyal, and it likes you already, Ronald. It keeps leaving the good pieces on your side. That is a courtship in some families. You should be flattered. She turned the beam of her attention onto Harry, and it settled on him with the weightless accuracy it always had. You've met the American girl. You've met her properly in the dark where people are honest. I can tell you've got the look. What look? The one you get when something's decided about you and you haven't decided back yet. Luna regarded him with terrible kindness. You had it about Fleur once, years ago in France. Now you've got 2 of them. That's going to be a very loud year, Harry. I would start eating well and sleeping when you can. At the staff table, McGonagall rose, and the hall came down to a murmur, and then to nothing. She spoke briefly, because she despised long speeches and considered brevity a moral position. She told them that Concord Year was the first time in living memory that the 3 great schools had shared a single roof for a full term. She told them there would be trials of accord, friendly exhibitions of skill, dueling and warding and flight, so that they might learn one another's magic and, more to the point, learn that the others were people. She told them the castle was under repair and that certain lower levels were closed and would remain closed, and she said this last part looking directly and unhurriedly at Harry, and then with equal deliberation at Wednesday, who returned the look with the serenity of a cat being told not to go on the table. We have spent a great deal of this century, McGonagall finished, learning what happens when we decide that the people who are not us are things instead of people. It is a short lesson and an expensive one, and I would prefer you learned it from me and not from experience. Eat, talk to someone who frightens you. Good night. The applause was real, which surprised the visiting students. Harry watched Wednesday not applaud, and watched Fleur applaud exactly 3 times precisely, the way one signs a document, and watched the 2 of them, without any possible way of having planned it, glance at each other down the length of the hall at the identical instant, and then deliberately glance away. He ate a little. He was tired in the specific way that had nothing to do with sleep. Across the hall, the black banner with its silver bird stirred in a draught that should not have reached it, and he watched the painted beak, open in its scream or its song, and thought about a real bird 4 floors down, laid out cold and neat by a hand that had not been there, and about a cold that came with a purpose and settled in. Fleur found him afterward in the emptying hall, while the house elves cleared the long tables, and the visiting students were herded off toward the guest wings by chaperones counting heads. She came and sat down across from him without asking, folded her hands on the scrubbed wood, and studied his face with the frank attention she had never once in the years he had known her wasted on being polite. You look terrible, she said. It's good to see you too. I mean it as a friend. You look like a man who sleeps 4 hours and calls it a lie-in. She tilted her head. The candlelight moved along the pale fall of her hair, and she ignored it, as she ignored most of what her own appearance did to a room, having decided a long time ago that it was other people's problem. They put you in the cellars, the great Harry Potter, hero of the age, and they have you counting stones in the dark because it is a thing that needs doing, and you are the one man who will not complain about doing it. I asked for the cellars. Of course you did. She said it without surprise, and something under her pride softened, which he had learned to watch for because she showed it to almost no one. You always ask for the corner nobody wants. It is one of the 2 things I respect about you, and one of the 3 that make me want to shake you. What's the second thing you respect? You looked at me in there when I came in. Fleur held his eyes. The whole hall looked at me. You looked at me and you thought, here you are. I felt it land. Do you know how rare that is for me, to be looked at and thought a person and not a prize on a shelf? She turned one hand over on the table, an old gesture, an offering of the palm. You did it to me the first time we met when we were children and I was insufferable and you were half my size and you have never once stopped. It is the reason I answered the letter. I didn't send a letter. You will, she said, eventually, once you stop being frightened of it. I am patient. She stood, unfolding to her full height with the unhurried certainty of someone who had never had to apologize for the space she took up, and she looked down at him with the warmth she kept behind the fire. Sleep, Harry. Whatever is in the cellar will still be in the cellar tomorrow. You are no good to it. Exhausted. She paused at the end of the table. And Harry, the American girl, the one who smelled the thing in your walls. Wednesday. She looked at you as she looked at nothing else in that hall. Fleur's mouth did something that was not quite a line and not quite anything he could name. I notice everything. Good night. He found the cold again well after midnight because he could not sleep and had never in his life been able to leave a wrong thing alone, and because some part of him he did not examine too closely wanted to know whether the tripline was still singing. It was not singing, it was cut. He stood at the mouth of the sealed passage with his wand up and his light small against the dark, reading the two ends of his own severed cord where they hung from the stone, and he was working out how long it would take to raise the castle when a voice behind him said, "It didn't cut your string." He did not jump. He was proud of that later. He turned with his wand already coming around and found Wednesday Addams standing 3 feet away in the black of the corridor, having crossed 40 yards of echoing flagstone without making a sound, watching him with her hands folded at her waist and the severed hand crouched alert on the stone by her boot. "I cut your string," she said. "You strung a tripline of light across the mouth of an active haunt. It would have told the thing exactly where you were the moment you said it. I did you a favor." She tilted her head a fraction, considering him. "You're welcome. You're not supposed to be down here. Neither are you. You're a reconstruction warden, not an investigator, and your headmistress told you to survey and not explore, and you disobeyed her within 8 hours, which is the single most interesting thing anyone in this castle has done since I arrived." Her gaze went past him to the dark of the passage, and her flat calm sharpened into something that was almost appetite. "There's a wanting down there. Do you know what that is?" "No." "Good. People who think they know are the ones it eats first." She stepped past him to the mouth of the passage, unafraid, and put her bare palm flat against the cold air as he had, and read it, and he watched her read it and understood that she was doing in seconds what had taken him 3 visits to half perceive. "It's young. It's been asleep a long time and something woke it up, and it's hungry, and it's found a very rich feeding ground." She turned her head and looked at him over her shoulder with those level dark eyes. You died," Wednesday said. "It was not a question. Once, properly. You went all the way out and you came back and you left the door open behind you, and things that live on the other side of that door can smell it on you the way I smell rot in a wall." She turned fully to face him, and in the small light her face was pale and grave and entirely without fear, and she looked at him the way no one had looked at him in a very long time, which was with genuine, undivided, uncomplicated interest. "I've read about you. The English papers are hysterical and useless, but I read between the lines. You interest me. You are the only thing in this entire drafty monument to institutional cowardice that interests me." She said it flatly as a finding, a thing measured and recorded. "I've decided to stay near you until I understand why." "That's not really your decision to make." "No," she agreed. "It's yours. I'm telling you what I've decided so you can factor it in." She looked back at the passage, and things scuttled to the boundary of the cold and pressed one finger to it, testing, a scout at a border. "The thing about a wanting is that it doesn't invent anything. It can't. It has no imagination at all, which is the one thing I have in common with it and the reason it disgusts me. It only takes what's already there and makes it bigger. A grudge becomes a murder. A crush becomes an obsession. 2 people who want the same thing become 2 people who will burn down a school rather than share it." She crouched and laid her palm flat on the stone, reading through it, patient as a physician taking a pulse. "It has been under this castle for a very long time, starving, because nobody down here wanted anything badly enough to be worth eating. And then the crews opened the lid and you started coming down alone at night, bleeding your particular history all over the dark, and now it's awake and it's paying attention, and it's going to be extremely interested in the fact that 2 people arrived at this castle today who have both, independently, decided they intend to have you." The silence held. Somewhere far below in the cold water moved. "Too," Harry said. "You're not stupid. Don't perform it for my benefit." She rose, unhurried, and brushed the grit from her palm. "The French one wants you the way a fire wants air. It's an old want and a proud one, and she has been very patient with it, and I respect that because patience is a discipline and most people don't have any. And I want you because you are the only genuinely interesting problem I have encountered in a year of being sent to schools full of people who scream." She said it without heat, without shame, as plain as a weather report. "The wanting downstairs is going to try to set the 2 of us against each other, because that is the richest meal it will ever get, and it is going to work, because she is proud and I do not lose, and you are exactly the kind of prize that 2 people like us destroy a castle over." She held his eyes. "I wanted you to know the shape of it before it started, so that when it starts you remember I told you the truth first. And if I don't want to be anyone's prize, Then you'll be the most interesting problem of all, said Wednesday Addams, and for a moment something moved under the flat dark of her face, a hair, a degree, the ghost of the thing other people's faces did when they were pleased and had not decided to hide it. Go to bed, Harry Potter. The thing downstairs isn't ready to come up yet, and I want to look at it a while longer without you bleeding survivors' blood all over my crime scene. I'll walk you out. You'll try to be gallant about it and insist on walking me instead, and we'll argue, and it will be tedious, and I'll win. Save us both the time. He looked at her, small and grave in the dark beside a severed hand at the mouth of a haunted passage, entirely at home, entirely unafraid, entirely certain of him in a way that should have alarmed him more than it did. After you, he said. Acceptable, said Wednesday, and rose and walked him out. He did not sleep after that either. He lay in the dark of the eighth-year dormitory with Ron snoring across the room and Neville murmuring at a plant in his sleep, and he stared at the canopy and turned the evening over in his hands like a stone he was trying to find the crack in. 2 women had arrived in his castle today. One of them had looked at him across a crowded hall and thought, here you are, and one of them had followed him into the dark and told him flatly that she had decided to keep him. Neither of them had asked. Both of them had been entirely honest about it, which was somehow worse and somehow better than if they had been sly. And under the whole of it, 4 floors down in the cold that did not move like cold, something old and hungry lay in the disturbed dark and waited to be fed, exactly the kind of thing that 2 proud, magnetic, immovable women circling the same man tended to produce in abundance. He was in trouble. He knew the shape of trouble by now. He had worn it like a coat since he was 11. This was a new cut of it. He turned onto his side and looked at the gray square of the window and made himself a promise in the dark, as he had learned to, quietly and without drama, so it would hold. He was not going to be a prize on anyone's shelf, not Fleur's, whom he cared for in the wary, complicated way you care for a person who sees you and refuses to flatter you. Not Wednesday's, who had walked out of a black carriage and named him like a specimen and looked at him with an interest so total it warmed him more than it should. Not the thing downstairs, which wanted to make all 3 of them into fuel for its long, cold appetite. He was a person. He had a will. He had spent a war learning exactly how much his will was worth, and he was not about to hand it over to anyone, however dazzling, however honest, however much some traitor part of him had liked being looked at like that. He turned the promise over once more to make sure it held. It held. Morning came gray and ordinary, and he went down to breakfast telling himself the night had been a night and the day would be a day. He was wrong, but only about the timing. Hermione caught him on the moving stair with a book already open in her hands, and Ron trailing a step behind her holding 2 slices of toast he had liberated in advance. A man who had learned that Hermione before breakfast was a weather system to be provisioned against. I was up until 3, Hermione said without preamble. There's nothing in the library which is itself information, because there is always something in the library, and the fact that there is nothing means somebody removed it. But I found a marginal note in a 15th century warder's log. It uses her word, wanting, capital letter, treated as a proper category and not a description. She turned the book so he could see a line of cramped brown ink he could not read. It says, a wanting is not laid by battle but by satiety. You do not fight it. You feed it until it is too full to move, or you starve it until it is too weak to hold shape. And then, Harry, the sentence just stops because the next 3 pages have been cut out of the book with a knife. Cut out when? The edges are old, centuries. Hermione closed the book. Somebody has known about this thing for a very long time and decided the safest thing to do with the knowledge was to seal it under 4 floors of stone and remove the instructions, which worked for about 600 years, right up until we handed the castle to a work crew and told them to open everything. Great, said Ron through toast. Love that, love a haunted lid. They came into the great hall together, and Harry was 2 steps in before he understood that the whole room had already gone quiet, and that the quiet was pointed at the far end of the Gryffindor table, where 2 women stood facing each other across the space he usually sat in, Fleur Delacour at one end. Silver pale and blazing, one hand loose at her side, chin up, standing in the aisle with the coiled ease of a duelist who has already decided how the fight ends and is merely waiting for the other party to catch up. Wednesday Addams at the other. Black and still, hands folded, head tilted the exact degree that meant she was interested, the severed hand poised on the tabletop beside her plate like a chess piece she had not yet moved. Between them on the bench in Harry's usual seat, laid out with terrible care, was a dead swift, wings folded flat, head turned neatly to the left, both black feet crossed at the ankle. You left this for him, said Fleur. Her voice was pleasant. It was the specific polished pleasantness she used immediately before things caught fire. In his place, where he sits, a dead thing arranged on the seat of a man who has buried more friends than you have ever met. I left him a gift, said Wednesday, unmoved, level, entirely certain. It's a swift. They sleep on the wing. They spend their whole lives without landing, and the only time they are ever still is when they die. She looked at the bird and then at Fleur and then past Fleur at Harry, who had stopped dead in the doorway with 300 people watching. I thought he would understand it. He's the only one here who has ever landed. It is a corpse on his breakfast, said Fleur, and you know it, and you did it because I told you last night that I intend to court him properly in the open like a person, and you decided this morning to show me that you do not intend to be a person about it at all. I decided, said Wednesday, that you talk a great deal about the open and the proper for someone whose entire family magic is designed to make people want you before they've decided to. At least I'm honest about the dead bird. The temperature of the room changed. It was not a metaphor. The candles guttered down the length of the hall, and the cold that lived 4 floors below reached up through the stone and touched the soles of everyone's shoes at once, and far away under everything, something turned over in its sleep and began delicately to feed. Harry felt it go through the floor. He felt it the way you feel a train before you hear it. And he looked at the two of them, silver fire and black stillness, squared off over a dead bird in his seat with the whole of Concord Year holding its breath, and he understood with the clean, cold clarity of a man watching a wave come in exactly what was happening, exactly what it was feeding, and exactly how little either of them had noticed. He walked the length of the table into the space between them. Nobody move the bird, he said. That's a crime scene. He looked at Wednesday. Thank you for the swift, I understood it. It was a real thing to say, and I'm not going to pretend it was. He looked at Fleur. You're right that it belongs at a graveside and not a breakfast, and she knows that too, which is why she did it here. He looked at the pair of them, and he pitched his voice so it carried, because if they were going to do this in front of an audience, he would use the audience. Here's the part neither of you felt just now, so I'll tell you because I felt it in the floor. There is a thing under this castle that eats exactly this. 2 people wanting the same thing and refusing to share it. You just fed it, it liked it. And if the 2 of you decide to spend this year proving which of you can want me harder, you are going to make it strong enough to bury this school, and I am going to be the reason, and I have been the reason enough buildings came down. So, you can want whatever you want, that's yours, but you don't get to make me the war, not this year, not in my castle. The silence after was different from the silence before. Fleur looked at him with the fire banked and something older behind it, reassessing. Wednesday looked at him with her head tilted the other way now, the degree that meant recalculating, and the ghost of a thing moved under her face again, closer to the surface. He gets more interesting, Wednesday said to Fleur almost conversationally, the more you refuse him things. Yes, said Fleur, not taking her eyes off Harry. I had noticed. And for one moment, over the dead bird and the guttering candles and the cold coming up through the floor, the 2 women who had spent the morning at each other's throats looked at each other with the exact same expression, and Harry, standing between them, understood that he had just made everything considerably more complicated, and that some entirely unrepentant part of him would not have taken it back. Sit down, he said to both of them. Eat something. We've got a monster to starve. Chapter 1 and Chapter 2. Terms of engagement. McGonagall had them all in her office before the porridge was cold. She did not offer chairs. She stood behind her desk with the portraits of dead headmasters, pretending not to eavesdrop, and she looked at the 3 of them arranged in front of her, Harry between the 2 women by an accident of the doorway that he was already regretting, and she let the silence do the first minute of the work. I have been a teacher for 41 years, she said finally. I have broken up duels between Death Eaters and Aurors on the front steps of this castle. I have confiscated a live manticore from a 4th year. This morning I watched 2 grown women, guests under my roof, turn my breakfast into a diplomatic incident over a corpse and a dead bird. She let that stand. Miss Delacour, Miss Addams, you will look at me and nod at each other if you can manage it, which I begin to doubt. Fleur looked at her. Wednesday, after a considering pause, also looked at her, in the manner of someone granting a small favor to be redeemed later. Good, said McGonagall. Now, I am told there is a wanting in my foundations. I am told by the one person in this room who has done the reading. She inclined her head a fraction toward Wednesday, and Hermione, standing by the door where she had wedged herself uninvited, made a soft sound of professional grievance, that it feeds on possessive fixation, and that the 2 of you are at present the richest meal it has been offered in 6 centuries. Is that a fair account? It undersells us, said Wednesday, but essentially. Then you will understand my position. The headmistress set both hands flat on the desk. I cannot forbid you to feel what you feel. I have never once in my life successfully forbidden a young person to feel a thing, and I have the gray hair to prove the attempts. But I can, and I do, forbid you to feed it. You will not duel in my corridors. You will not sabotage each other's magic where a 1st year might walk into it. And you will not either of you make Mr. Potter into the trophy in a contest, because he has asked you not to in front of 300 witnesses, and because I heard him, and because he was right. She turned her head. Potter, you look as though you have an opinion. You are permitted one opinion, briefly. Just one, Harry said. I don't need managing. I need the thing downstairs starved before it gets strong enough to come up. Everything else is a distraction, including me, especially me. He glanced at Fleur and at Wednesday and did not soften it. You both heard me this morning. I meant all of it. You can want what you want, but if you turn me into the war, I'll walk out of the middle of it and let the 2 of you find something else to fight about, and you'll have lost me before either of you had me. That's not a threat. That's just the arithmetic. The office was very quiet. One of the portraits murmured well and was hushed by another. That, said McGonagall, is the most sensible thing said in this room since I inherited it. Miss Granger, you have your research partner. She nodded at Wednesday. Whether she wants one is her affair. Mr. Potter, you have your reconstruction detail and, as of this moment, a formal charge to investigate the lower Undercroft under my authority, so that you may stop pretending you were not going to do it anyway. Miss Delacour, you have 30 students who came to Scotland to learn to duel from the finest young talent in France, and I suggest you go and be that magnificently in the practice hall where fire is permitted. The rest of you out, I have a castle to hold up. They filed out. In the corridor, the three of them stood in the ordinary morning light with the whole thing hanging unspoken between them, and it was Fleur who broke it, because Fleur broke most silences she disliked. He is right, she said to Wednesday over Harry's head, which was a thing both of them did and which he intended to complain about at the earliest opportunity. I hate that he is right, it is one of the three things. He's usually right about the boring parts, said Wednesday. It's the interesting parts he's wrong about. On this, said Fleur, we agree. And the two of them looked at each other for a moment with something that was not friendship and was no longer quite war, and then went their separate ways down separate stairs, and Harry stood alone in the corridor and understood that his life had become a negotiation between two powers who had just discovered they could form a coalition against him. That's worse, he told Hermione. Somehow that's worse. Oh, it's much worse, Hermione agreed cheerfully, opening her book. Come on. We've got a monster to read about, and someone's cut all the useful pages out of history, and I intend to take it personally. The library at mid-morning was nearly empty, which suited Hermione, who conducted research the way a general conducts a siege, and did not like witnesses to the parts where she lost. She had commandeered a long table near the restricted stacks and covered it end to end with open volumes, and Ron had been deployed to the reference shelves with a list, and Luna had drifted in on her own current and was sitting cross-legged on the tabletop itself, holding a very old book upside down and looking, occasionally, deeply satisfied by it. 3 schools worth of history in this castle, Hermione said, not looking up, and every account of the lower levels has a hole in exactly the same place. Beauxbatons visiting scholars wrote it up in the 1500s. Somebody cut their pages too. It's the same knife, Harry, metaphorically. 6 centuries of people finding out about this thing, and every one of them deciding the safest move was to forget on purpose. She turned a brittle page with a conservator's care. I hate people who solve problems by making everyone stupider. It works, is the infuriating part. It worked for 600 years. It stopped working the day we opened the lid, Harry said. He had a warder's log open in front of him, the one with the cut pages, and he ran a finger down the ragged stubs where the instructions had been. So somewhere there's a copy that didn't get cut. There has to be. You don't seal a thing without writing down how, in case the seal fails. Somebody kept the real instructions. Somebody paranoid, said a flat voice from the end of the aisle, and careful and unwilling to trust the future to be less foolish than the present. Wednesday came out of the stacks without a sound, a black book already in her hands, thing riding on her shoulder for once, and she set the book down on Hermione's table with the finality of a woman laying down a winning card, which is why they wouldn't have left it in a library. Libraries are where you put the things you want found. You hide the dangerous instructions where only someone as careful as you would think to look. Hermione looked at the black book and looked at Wednesday, and Harry watched the two most relentless minds he knew take each other's measure across a table of dead men's handwriting. You've read the Nevermore archive on this, Hermione said. It was not a question. Your school kept a record. My family kept a record. My school merely failed to burn it. Wednesday opened the black book to a marked page. A wanting is not a ghost and not a demon. It's an appetite that outlived the person it belonged to. Somewhere, a very long time ago, someone stood in the dark under this castle and wanted a single thing so completely, and was denied it so absolutely that the wanting did not die when they did. It stayed. It went hungry. It learned to eat the same shape of hunger in everyone who came near. She turned the book so they could all see the cramped diagram inked on the page, a spiral folding into itself. It doesn't have a face of its own. It borrows. It wears the face of whatever you want most or whatever wants you most, because that's the face you'll walk toward into the dark. My people call it borrowing the beloved. It's how wanting takes you, not by force, by invitation. It becomes the thing you can't refuse, and then it waits for you to refuse everything else instead. Ron, arriving with an armload of books, set them down slowly. So when it wore Harry's face in the window, it was practicing, said Wednesday. On the 2 people in this castle who want him most, it tried the shape on for size in front of us to see if it fit. She looked at Harry, and there was nothing soft in it, only a cold accuracy that was its own kind of care. It's going to get very good at being me, Harry, and at being her, because we're the strongest signals in the building. At some point, it's going to walk up out of that stair wearing a face you love and asking you to come down, and it will be perfect, and the only thing that will save you is that you'll know, because I'm telling you now in a library in daylight that whatever comes for you in the dark wearing our faces is not us. She closed the book. Write that down somewhere the monster can't reach, your own handwriting, so when it happens you have proof from before. Luna, upside down over her book, said dreamily, "That's the kindest thing anyone said in this room. She warned you against herself. People only do that when they mean to be trusted." She turned a page the wrong way. "You should keep her, Harry, both of them really, but you can't say that yet, so I'll say it and you can pretend you didn't hear." "I didn't hear that," said Harry. "That's all right," Luna said serenely. "The monster did." Harry did not let the library warning sit. That was the difference the war had beaten into him, that a thing understood and not acted on was a thing half forgotten by morning. So he borrowed Hermione's quill on the spot and wrote, on the inside cover of his own reconstruction ledger where he would see it every working day, the sentence Wednesday had told him to keep. "Whatever comes up the stair wearing a face you love is not them." She said so first. You believed her in daylight. "You're actually doing it," Ron said, watching over his shoulder. "Taking orders from the girl with the hand, writing notes to your future self about not trusting your dead mum. This is a normal Tuesday for us now. I want that on the record." "It's Thursday," said Harry. "It's worse that it's Thursday." Ron dropped into the chair beside him, and under the joke his face had gone serious, the way it did when the danger got real enough to stop being funny. "Listen. Whatever you decide about those two, and it's your business and I'm not touching it with a broom, just don't do the thing, the Harry thing, where you work out that the safest move is you alone in a cellar being brave so nobody else has to be." He met his eyes. "You've got about 4 people in this castle who'd walk into the dark for you without being asked, and 2 of them are terrifying, and all of them would rather you didn't make them do it over your corpse. That's all. That's my whole speech. I practiced it less than Fleur did. You heard about the stairs speech. Everyone heard about the stairs speech. She practiced it twice on a Beauxbatons second year who's still recovering." Ron stood and clapped him on the shoulder, and the seriousness folded back under the ordinary. "Go to your cellar, don't die. Bring me back something haunted. I want to freak out Neville's plants." Harry went down to the reconstruction with the warning fresh in his own ink and his own hand, and it steadied him more than he expected, the small act of leaving a message for the version of himself who would need it, and he understood, halfway down the stair, that this was the thing both women kept doing to him without either of them planning it. They kept making him a person who wrote things down for his own future, instead of a symbol who spent himself and left nothing behind. It was, he decided, an improvement, and he would never tell either of them so, because they would only compete over which of them had improved him more. Fleur came for him at dusk, in the reconstruction, which was the last place he expected her, and exactly the place she would choose. It was up a ladder, resetting a warding stone into the arch above the Undercroft stair, mortar to the elbows, when the light in the passage changed and he looked down and she was there, watching him work with her arms folded and her head tilted, in a duelist's practical robes with her sleeves pushed up in a smudge of chalk dust on one forearm from the practice hall. "You point stone left-handed," she said. "I did not know that about you. There's a lot you don't know about me." "Yes," she said it plainly. "That is the entire appeal. Come down. You have been up there an hour and the light is going and I refuse to court a man through the soles of his boots." He came down. He wiped his hands on a rag that made them worse and turned to face her in the narrow passage with the cold breathing up from below, and she looked at him as she looked at everything she had decided to take seriously, which was completely. "I taught fire today," she said. 30 children, 3 of them English, all of them frightened of me for the first 10 minutes and none of them frightened of me for the last 10, and do you know how I did that? I burned my own sleeve, on purpose, badly, and let them watch me put it out and swear in French. You cannot respect what you are only ever afraid of." She pushed the ruined, chalk-dusted sleeve up further, and there was, in fact, a scorch along the hem. "I want to tell you something, and I want you to not do the thing where you deflect it with a joke, because I have watched you do that to compliments for years, and it is the single most cowardly thing about you." She waited until he stopped whatever he had been about to say. "When I was 17, I entered a tournament because I thought if I won it, people would finally see that there was a person inside the face. I nearly drowned in a lake for it. And the one who came for my sister when I could not, when the allure and the beauty and all of it were worth exactly nothing under 30 feet of black water, was a 14-year-old boy who did not even like me, who thought I was arrogant, which I was, who saved a little girl he had never met because it did not occur to him to weigh her life against the rules." Her chin came up. "I have loved a great many things about you since, Harry Potter. But I have respected you since I was 17 and cold and standing on a dock watching you carry my sister out of the water, and respect is the thing that lasts. Beauty is a weather, respect is a foundation. I am here on the foundation." He did not deflect it with a joke. It cost him something not to, and she watched him pay it, and her face did the softening thing she showed almost no one. "I don't know what to do with that," he said honestly. "I know. It is why I said it to you here in the dark, where you cannot run, and not in the hall, where you would perform being unmoved for the audience." She reached out and with one finger wiped a fleck of dried mortar from his jaw, a liberty taken with enormous confidence. "I am not going to pretend I do not want you. I am too old for that game and I have never been any good at it. But I am also not going to do it the way the other one does, by leaving corpses on your breakfast to prove she has read your grief. I will do it in the open, like a person. And when you choose, if you choose, it will be a real choice made by a man who was allowed to make it. She stepped back. There, that is my opening move. It was honesty. The next one is worse for her because she does not have very much practice with honesty, and I have a great deal. Behind her, in the depthless black of the corridor mirror the crews had propped against the wall to catch light down the passage, something moved that was not their reflection. Harry saw it over her shoulder, and his hand was on his wand before his mind had finished the thought. In the glass, the passage was the same passage, the same cold stone, the same two figures. Except the figure that should have been Fleur stood a half-second behind her real movements, and its head was turned the wrong way, watching him, and its eyes in the mirror were the flat pale of a bird's. "Don't move," he said very quietly, and she went still with the instant trust of someone who had been in real fights. "The mirror, behind you, don't turn fast." She turned slow. The reflection snapped back into place between one breath and the next, two ordinary people in an ordinary passage, chalk dust and mortar in the failing light. But the cold had come up thick around their ankles while they weren't watching, and the Swedish wrong note of old flowers hung in the air, and far below them, faintly, something that had been listening pulled back into the dark, satisfied with what it had heard. "It watched us," Fleur said. She did not sound afraid. She sounded like a duelist who had learned something about her opponent's reach. "It watched us be tender, and it liked it as much as it liked us fighting, Harry." She looked at him with new, cold understanding. "It does not care whether we love or we hate. It only cares that we want. It feeds on the wanting, whichever way it runs." "Yeah," he said, "that's what I've been afraid of." "Then the game just changed for both of us," said Fleur, "and I am going to have to think." She touched his jaw once more, deliberately, in full view of the dark glass, an act of defiance aimed at the thing in the wall. "But not tonight. Tonight I have made my opening move, and I am going to leave you to lie awake over it, which is the only unfair thing I intend to do to you." And she went up the stair into the light, unhurried, magnificent, leaving him alone with a cold mirror and a great deal to think about. He did not go up after her. He stayed because the mirror had shown him something, and he was who he was, and he stood in front of the propped glass with his wand lit and made himself watch his own reflection until his eyes ached. For a long stretch it was only him, tired and mortar-stained. Then once, for less than a second, his reflection blinked out of time with him, a hair late, the pale bird-eye surfacing and sinking, and it lifted one reflected hand and pressed the palm to the inside of the glass, patient, a prisoner testing a wall from the wrong side, or a thing measuring the thickness of the door it meant to come through. "Not yet," Harry told it out loud, because he had learned that naming a thing's timing to its face sometimes rattled it. "You're not ready. You wouldn't be practicing if you were ready." The reflection tilted its head precisely, in a gesture he had seen somewhere very recently, and then it was only him again, and the cold sank back down the stair. He wrote 3 lines in his own hand on the back of a delivery docket and put it in his breast pocket over his heart where the monster could not reach. "Whatever comes up the stair wearing a face you love is not them. W said so first. You read this before it happened." Wednesday came for him differently. He did not hear her arrive, which was becoming a pattern he disliked. He was in the 8th year common room after midnight, alone, the fire burned to embers, a stolen library book open on his knees and getting him nowhere, when he became aware that the temperature of the room had dropped and that there was someone sitting in the chair across from him who had not been there when he last looked up. "You read with your mouth moving," Wednesday observed, "when the words are difficult. You did it just now over the Latin. It's the most undignified thing about you, and I've decided it's the reason I trust you." She had a wooden box on her knees, small, black, and old. Thing rode on the arm of her chair, alert, watching Harry with what he was beginning to recognize as approval. "I brought you a gift, a real one this time, not a message dressed as a bird. You objected to the bird. I've factored it in. Wednesday, it's 1 in the morning, the best hour. Everyone honest is awake, and everyone dishonest is asleep." She set the box on the low table between them and opened the lid, and inside, on a bed of black velvet, was a beetle the size of a plum, iridescent green-black, its carapace catching the embers so it seemed lit from within, perfectly preserved, perfectly still. A Balkan tomb beetle. They only live in the dark of old graves, in the cold, where nothing else will go. My uncle collected them. This one has been dead 90 years, and it has not lost a single color. She looked at it and then at Harry with the grave directness she brought to everything. "I thought of you when I looked at it, something that lives where nobody else will, in the cold, in the dark, and does not stop being beautiful just because the place it survives in is terrible." A pause. "That's a compliment. I'm not fluent in them. I've told you what it means so you don't have to guess." He looked at the beetle. It was, he had to admit, genuinely beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with anything soft. "That's the most honest thing anyone said to me all year," he said, "and one of them was Fleur tonight, so that's a high bar. I know she got to you tonight. You've got the look." Wednesday did not sound jealous. She sounded like a scientist noting an interesting result. "The French one is very good at the frontal assault. Fire and honesty and a hand on your face where the monster can see it. She'll win a lot of ground that way." She closed the box and pushed it across the table to him. I don't do frontal assaults. I do the thing where I understand you better than the people who have known you for years, and I say the true thing nobody else will say, and one day you realize you've stopped performing for me because there's no point. I already see it. That's my campaign. It's slower. It doesn't lose." She rose. "The beetle is yours, whatever you decide. It's not a bribe. I don't bribe. I only ever tell you what's true and let it do the work." "Why me?" Harry said. He did not mean it as a deflection, and she heard that it was. "You could find any interesting corpse in Europe. Why decide on the one person in this castle who keeps telling you no?" She considered the question with the seriousness it deserved, standing over him in the dying firelight, and she did not reach for a clever answer, which he was learning was the highest respect she paid anyone. "Because you tell me no and mean it," she said. "Everyone else in my life has either obeyed me or feared me, and both are boring, and I have never once had to wonder what a person actually thought because they were too busy managing me to think anything. You aren't managing me. You're deciding about me in real time, and I can't predict the outcome, and I have not been unable to predict an outcome since I was 6 years old." Her flat gaze held his. "You're the first genuinely open question I've met. I don't fall in love, Harry. I've considered the phrase and rejected it as imprecise. But I've decided to find out what you are all the way to the bottom, and I don't stop, and I don't get bored, and that is either the worst thing that will ever happen to you or the best, and neither of us gets to know which yet. I find that unbearable. I've decided to bear it. Near you." She tilted her head. "That's more words than I've said to anyone in a year." "Don't get used to it, Wednesday." He stopped her at the portrait hole. "The wanting. Fleur worked it out tonight in the passage. It doesn't care if we love or hate, it just feeds on the wanting, and in the library you said it borrows the beloved, it wears the face." Something changed in her face, the flat calm going down into a place colder and older. "Then she's smarter than I gave her credit for," Wednesday said, "which is inconvenient because now I have to respect her and I hate that." She considered the dark of the portrait hole. "It means the two of us are a bonfire we can't put out just by making peace. As long as we both want you, we feed it, whether we fight or not. The only thing that starves it is if the wanting stops being possessive. If it stops being about winning you and starts being about—" She paused, tasting the unfamiliar word, "you," which neither of us knows how to do yet because we're both people who win things. She looked back at him, and for a moment the whole armor of her went transparent, and he saw underneath someone quite young standing at the edge of a thing she did not have a map for. "It's the most interesting problem I've ever been handed, and I still don't intend to lose. I'm just going to have to learn a new way to win. Good night, Harry Potter. Read with your mouth moving. I like it." And she was gone, and the beetle sat on the table catching the last of the embers, and Harry sat in the cold and understood that both of them had in one night told him the truth, and that the truth from two directions at once was going to be far harder to survive than any lie. The first open contest happened 3 days later, and it happened technically by accident, which is how the best contests always begin. The trials of Accord opened with a warding exhibition in the Great Hall, benches cleared, the 3 delegations arranged along the walls, McGonagall presiding from a high seat with the air of a woman refereeing a piece she did not trust. The premise was simple and friendly. A warder from each school would raise a shield work, and the others would test it courteously with graded pressure, and everyone would learn how the others built their walls. It was meant to be a lecture with sparks. Fleur went for Beauxbatons. She built a shield of layered fire. 3 shells of flame nested one inside the other, blue at the core, and it stood in the middle of the hall turning slowly like a thing alive, and the visiting students made the sound they made at beautiful things. She tested it herself first, threw a hex into it and let it drink the hex and brighten, and then she stepped back and inclined her head to the room, an invitation, magnificent and unmistakable. Come and try. Nobody wanted to try. Nobody except one person, who rose from the black bench of the Nevermore delegation without hurry and walked to the mark, and the hall went very quiet because everyone had been waiting 3 days for exactly this without admitting it. "Miss Addams," said McGonagall in a warning tone. "Courteous, graded pressure," Wednesday said. "Those were the rules. I intend to be extremely courteous." She drew her wand, which was black and short and looked less like a wand than like something a surgeon would own, and she looked at Fleur's turning shield of fire with the clinical interest of a woman appraising a lock. "It's very beautiful," she told the hall. "That's its weakness. It's built to be looked at. Watch." She did not throw fire at fire, which was what everyone expected, which was what the shield was built to drink. She threw cold. A thin lance of absolute stillness, a killing frost with no flame in it at all, and where it touched the outer shell the fire did not fight it, because the fire had nothing to grip, and a single pane of Fleur's beautiful shield went dark and brittle and shivered like glass. The hall inhaled. And Fleur, who was proud but was not slow, laughed once, a real laugh, delighted and dangerous, and rebuilt the shattered pane between one heartbeat and the next, and this time she wove the cold into it, learned it, made the fire and the frost hold hands, so that the next lance Wednesday threw met a wall that had already eaten the idea of it. "Better," said Wednesday with grudging approval. "You learn fast." "I learn," said Fleur constantly. Again. And then it was not a lecture anymore. It was not a duel either, quite. It was 2 artists showing each other, in front of an audience, the thing each of them was best in the world at, and neither of them was willing to be second. Fleur's fire climbed and split and became 100 small suns that Wednesday put out one by one with flicks of frost, precise as a woman closing 100 small doors, and Wednesday's cold crept along the floor in patient fingers that Fleur burned back with contemptuous ease, and the two of them moved around the cleared hall in a widening circle, reading each other, adjusting, escalating, and it was the most beautiful and the most dangerous thing anyone in that hall had ever watched. And every single person in it had forgotten to breathe. Thing had climbed to the top of a bench and was keeping score on its fingers, running out of them, including, for about 90 seconds, Harry. Then he noticed the cold coming up through the floor. He noticed it as he was learning to, a change in the pressure of the room below his feet, the Swedish wrong note stealing in under the wood smoke and the sparks. On the walls, the shadows of the two duelists had grown too long and had begun, subtly, to move a half-beat out of time with the bodies that cast them. In the tall arched windows, the reflections of the fight were brighter than the fight and hungrier. The whole hall was leaning toward the spectacle, 300 people wanting the same two women to win, wanting the clash, wanting more, and 4 floors down the thing in the cold was drinking it like a man at a spring after a desert. "Stop," Harry said. Nobody heard him. The hall was roaring now, the visiting students on their feet. He did the only thing that would work, which was to walk into the middle of it. He stepped off the bench and into the widening circle between the fire and the frost, into the exact place where a stray hex would end him, and he stood there with his hands open and empty at his sides, and both women saw him at the same instant, and both women, on pure reflex, killed their spells. The fire guttered out, the frost withdrew. The hall's roar collapsed into an appalled silence, and into that silence Harry said conversationally to the two of them, "It's feeding right now, look at the windows." They looked. In the tall, dark glass, the reflected hall was still cheering, still leaning, a phantom crowd hungry for a fight the real crowd had abandoned, and at the front of the phantom crowd, where Harry's own reflection should have stood, was a shape with a bird's flat, pale eyes, and it was clapping. The temperature dropped 10 degrees in a breath. Somewhere a child began to cry, and the reflection of Harry Potter in the tall window turned its bird-pale eyes on the real Harry and mouthed, with terrible patience, the words, "More, please." "Everybody out," said McGonagall on her feet, her voice cracking across the hall like a whip. "Prefects, your houses now, calmly. Delegations to your chaperones. Move." And the hall began, in fear but in order, to empty, and the phantom crowd in the glass thinned as the real one did, until only the 3 of them and the headmistress were left, and the thing in the window stood alone in an empty, reflected hall, watching Harry with its head cocked, and then, unhurried, walked backward into the dark of the glass and was gone. The cold went with it. The wrong note faded. The ordinary chill of an autumn castle came back like a mercy. "Well," said Wednesday into the quiet, contemplating the empty window with the appreciation of a connoisseur. "It's got a sense of theater, I respect that." "It clapped," said Fleur, and there was fury in it, the clean, bright anger of a proud woman who has just understood she was being used. "It sat in the glass and it clapped for us. We built it a stage and we performed for it, and it applauded, both of us." She turned on Wednesday, and for one dangerous second the old rivalry flared, the instinct to blame. Then it went out because she was not slow, because she had already worked out that the blame was the meal. "We cannot do that again," she said instead quietly. "You and I, we cannot give it that. It is the best thing we do, and we cannot do it, because every time we are magnificent at each other, it grows." "No," Wednesday agreed, "we can't." She sounded distantly bereaved, in the way a wolf might mourn a fence. "It's taken the one thing I was actually enjoying about this castle and made it poison." She looked at Fleur with something that was almost unwillingly kinship. "I still intend to win him." "I know," said Fleur. "So do I. We will simply have to do it without the parts that were fun." She almost smiled. Neither of them quite did. McGonagall came down from her high seat, and she was pale, and she looked older than she had that morning, and she stopped in front of Harry and put one hand on his shoulder, which she had done perhaps 3 times in his life. "It knew your face," she said low, so the 2 women would not hear the fear in it. "It wore your face to the front of that crowd. Potter, it has decided what it wants, and what it wants is you, and it is using these 2 remarkable, ridiculous young women to build itself a body out of everyone in this castle who has ever wanted something they couldn't have." Her hand tightened. "I have removed the wrong pages once already, 600 years ago, or my predecessors did. I will not seal you under stone and call it safe. So you will find out how to starve it, and you will do it before it is strong enough to come up the stair, and you will not do it alone, and that is not a request." "No, Professor," Harry said, "I worked that out." That night he could not sleep again, and he went down to the reconstruction again, because he was who he was, and he was not surprised this time to find that he was not the only one who had come. Fleur was already there, sitting on an overturned crate at the mouth of the Undercroft stair, with a globe of blue flame hovering at her shoulder for light, reading, of all things, one of Hermione's borrowed books. And Wednesday was there, cross-legged on the cold stone at the very threshold of the sealed dark thing beside her, both of them perfectly still, listening to something below that Harry could not hear. Neither woman had said a word to the other. Both had come to the same place at the same hour, drawn by the same problem, and had settled at a careful distance and gotten to work separately on the thing that neither of them could solve alone. Harry stood at the top of the stair and looked at the two of them, the fire and the frost, the proud one and the grave one, both of them here in the middle of the night, not to court him and not to fight, but to figure out how to keep a castle full of children from being eaten by their own desire. And he understood something that he did not have a clean word for and did not try to find one. "Room for a third," he said. Wednesday did not turn around. "I saved you a piece of the cold floor," she said. "It's the good spot, you can hear it breathing from there." "I brought coffee," said Fleur, "because I did not think either of you would, and I was correct." She held up a battered thermos with the air of a woman producing a trump card. "It is French, it is better than yours. Sit down, Harry, before you fall down, and let us three ruin our sleep together, since apparently that is the arrangement now." He came down the stair and sat on the cold floor between them in the dark, above the breathing thing, and for a while none of them said anything at all, and the not saying was its own kind of truce, the first one that had cost the monster below them nothing, because for once in the small hours in the cold, none of the three of them was trying to win. "It listened to us tonight," Wednesday said at last into the dark, not to either of them and to both, in the hall. "It listened to 300 people wanting the same thing, and it grew fat on it, and now it's listening to us." She tipped her head toward the stair, toward the cold, toward the patient breathing under the stone. "3 people who all want the same man, sitting in a row, drinking bad coffee and not fighting about it. I want you to understand how much that confuses it. It's the most disappointing meal it's had since it woke up." Something in her flat voice bent, almost, toward warmth. "I've decided I enjoy disappointing it more than I enjoy winning. That's new, I'm keeping notes." Fleur laughed low in the dark and passed the thermos, and Harry took it and drank and burned his tongue, and the three of them sat above the hungry dark and starved it together for 1 hour on purpose, and it was the first thing any of them had done all week that felt like the beginning of a way out. It did not last, nothing that easy ever did. But it happened, and the thing in the dark, listening for the wanting, for the possession, for the sweet familiar poison of 2 people refusing to share, heard instead 3 people sharing a bad coffee in the cold, and found for the first time since it woke that it had gone a little hungry. Chapter 2 and Chapter 3. Exhibition. The rule they made for themselves had 3 parts, and Wednesday wrote them on the reconstruction wall in chalk so none of them could pretend later that they had forgotten. 1. No competing over Harry in public or private, in word or in spell. 2. No being magnificent at each other where the castle could watch, because the castle was full of people who wanted things, and a crowd that wanted was a table the wanting could set. 3, which Fleur added and Wednesday grudgingly allowed to stand, was, we tell each other the truth about him so it can never get between us by lying. That last one is going to cost you, Wednesday told her, capping the chalk. You're going to have to tell me things you'd rather keep, so am I. It's the only rule with teeth. I know, said Fleur. I wrote it for the teeth. They shook hands over it once briskly, 2 duelists agreeing terms before a bout, and Harry, watching from the stair with 2 mugs of the bad coffee and an armful of Hermione's notes, understood that he was watching the strangest peace treaty in the history of the castle, negotiated between 2 people who both fully intended to win the same thing and had agreed for now only on how they would not. You realize, he said, coming down, you're both being incredibly decent right now, and it's terrifying. It is temporary, Fleur assured him, taking a mug. Enjoy it. When the monster is dead, I intend to resume being completely unreasonable about you. Likewise, said Wednesday. Great, said Harry. Something to look forward to. Hermione arrived while they were still shaking on it, with the specific expression she wore when she had found something and did not like it, and she did not bother with hello. The second trial is tomorrow, she said, the dueling exhibition. And I have spent the night measuring the courtyard, and I need all 3 of you to look at this and take it seriously, because it is going to get someone hurt. She unrolled a diagram across a crate, the courtyard, the tiered benches, the dueling platform, and over it all, sketched in, the great shield dome the officials raised for spectator safety. They polished the underside of the dome so the crowd can see the duel reflected from every angle. It is a mirror. It is a mirror the size of the sky, and beneath it they are going to put 300 people who all want the same thing, and the thing under this castle reaches through reflections that have wanting pointed at them. Do you see? They have built it, without knowing, the single most dangerous object in Scotland, and they are going to fill it with fuel and light it on purpose. The 3 of them looked at the diagram. The bad coffee went cold in Harry's hand. So we cancel the trial, he said. On what grounds? Hermione spread her hands. Nothing has happened. If McGonagall cancels an international trial the day before with no reason a governor can see, 3 schools decide Hogwarts is unsafe and hostile, 300 students are angry and humiliated and homesick and wanting justice, and that is another kind of feast, slower but just as rich. There is no clean way out of this. The trial happens, so we plan for the dome. She looked at Wednesday. You're the one who understands it. If it comes through the dome, how do we take the dome away from it? Wednesday studied the diagram with the flat attention she gave to locks and corpses. The dome is pinned to the courtyard walls at 4 anchor points, she said. It's a working, not a wall. Unmake the anchors and it stops being a mirror. It becomes ordinary air. She looked up at Harry. You reset warding stones for a living now. 4 anchors in sequence, fast, under pressure, with the thing already through and feeding. Can you do it? If I can get a clear line to all 4, then that's your job if it happens, Wednesday said. Hers is fire to wall the crowd off from its meal. Mine is cold to strangle the shape once it's out. Yours is the door. You take away the door. She rolled the diagram closed and handed it back to Hermione with something that was nearly courtesy. That's a good catch. You'd have made a competent mortician. It's the highest thing I say about anyone. I'm going to choose to be flattered, said Hermione, because we don't have time for me to be anything else. The second trial of accord was the dueling exhibition, and it was the one the whole castle had been waiting for, and Harry had entered it himself. He had entered under his own name in the general lists, not as anyone's champion and not as a headline. McGonagall had raised one eyebrow at his registration and said nothing, which from her was a paragraph. Ron had said a great deal. You've spent 7 years trying not to be the show, and now you're volunteering for the show, he had pointed out reasonably over breakfast. That's new, that's a symptom. It's the opposite, Harry said. If I sit in the stands, I'm the prize the whole thing's being fought over. If I'm in the lists, I'm just a bloke in a bracket who might lose in the first round. I'd rather be the second thing. I've spent long enough being the first. You, said Hermione over her tea, with the particular fondness she reserved for watching him work something out, are handling this considerably better than either of them expected, and I think it's driving both of them slightly mad, and I love it. Go win your bracket, or lose it. Either way, you've made your point. The dueling pitch had been raised in the courtyard, a long platform of white stone ringed with the shield dome so the spectators could watch without catching the overspill, and the 3 schools filled the tiered benches in their colors, and above them the autumn sky ran with fast gray cloud. McGonagall and the visiting heads sat under a canopy. Fleur in Beauxbatons blue was down among the Beauxbatons students, being an instructor, radiating the specific calm of a woman who was not competing today and could therefore simply be dangerous at rest. Wednesday sat with the Nevermore delegation in her habitual black thing on her knee, and had entered the lists as well, which had caused a small crisis in the officials' tent that she had resolved by pointing out that nowhere in the rules did it say the duelists had to be, quote, alive in the conventional sense, which nobody had wanted to unpack. Harry's first bout was against a Durmstrang-trained Beauxbatons exchange student, a big fast young man who dueled the way a hammer works, all downward force and forward pressure, and Harry watched him win his opening exchange and understood him completely inside 30 seconds. The trick to a hammer was to stop being an anvil. Harry gave ground on purpose, shield angled to spill the force sideways instead of catching it square, and he let the big fellow spend his fury into empty air, and he read the rhythm of him, the 3 fast blows and the half-beat pause to breathe, 3 in a pause, 3 in a pause, and on the 4th pause Harry took his legs out from under him with a low sweeping charm no more dramatic than a broom clearing a step. The young man went down onto the white stone unhurt, astonished. The hall applauded. It was not the roar it would have been for a spectacle. It was the respect a crowd pays a craftsman, and Harry, walking off the platform, found he liked it a great deal more than the roar. You dueled like a man solving a lock, Fleur said low as he passed her bench. She did not touch him. Rule 2, quietly, from the inside. Nobody watching learned how you did it, which means nobody watching can do it to you. Her eyes were bright. I have wanted to see you fight for real for years, and I did not know you fought like that. It is not what I expected. It is better. High praise from the best duelist in the yard. The second best today, said Fleur, and nodded once down the pitch to where Wednesday was walking to the mark for her own first bout. I do not perform when she is about to. It is bad manners to talk over an execution. Wednesday's opponent was a 7th-year Hogwarts duelist with more nerve than sense, and the bout lasted 11 seconds. She did not move her feet. She stood at the mark with her hands folded until the count, and when the 7th year's first hex came she stepped it, one economical tilt of the body, no wider than a person avoiding a puddle, and answered with something small and gray and precise that took him off his feet and laid him down on the white stone gasping, unharmed, entirely defeated, staring up at the fast gray sky with the expression of a person who has just understood that he was never in the fight at all. She had not been magnificent, that was the discipline of it, and Harry saw her make the choice. She could have been terrifying, could have given the crowd the show it wanted and fed the thing under the castle a full meal of 100 people gasping at her, and instead she had won as plainly and quietly as flicking off a lamp, and had walked back to her bench with her eyes down, deliberately unthrilling, refusing the applause before it could gather. She threw it, Fleur murmured, watching, and there was reluctant admiration in it. Not the bout, the spectacle. She could have made them scream, and she chose not to. She's starving it in public in the middle of a tournament where every instinct she has is telling her to be the most frightening thing in the yard. She shook her head slowly. I did not know she had that in her, to want the win and refuse the glory so the castle stays safe. That is not nothing. That is discipline of a very high order, and it is the sort of thing I would do, and I am not accustomed to meeting people who would do the sort of thing I would do. You're doing the same thing, Harry pointed out. Sitting there being quiet, it's costing you too. It is agony, Fleur agreed serenely. Do not tell her I said so. Rule 3 does not require me to volunteer my suffering. The brackets thinned through the afternoon. Harry won his second bout against a whip-fast Nevermore girl who fought with a wandwork he had never seen, close and low and full of feints, and he lost the first exchange badly and had to reset on the back foot and find her pattern under the feints, which took longer, and the crowd went quiet in the good way, the craftsman's way, watching two people actually think at each other. He won it in the end by refusing every feint until she committed to a real strike, and then he was there waiting for it. His third bout he won faster, having warmed to it, and each time he walked off the platform he felt more like a person and less like a symbol, which was the thing he had actually entered for and had not told anyone. Wednesday won her way up the other side of the bracket in a series of brief, undramatic executions that left a trail of baffled, unharmed opponents blinking at the sky. And it became apparent around the fourth round to everyone in the courtyard that if the two of them kept winning they would meet in the final. Harry Potter and the girl in black, the saved and the strange. The whole courtyard understood it at once and wanted it and leaned toward it and did not know what it was doing. Harry felt the cold come up through the white stone of the pitch at the exact moment the crowd worked out the arithmetic. He felt it as he always did now, a pressure below the feet, the sweet wrong note of old flowers stealing in under the smell of cut grass and shield magic. Because the crowd had understood all at once that Wednesday Addams and Harry Potter might duel each other for real in the final in front of everyone, and 300 people had begun, without knowing they were doing it, to want that, to lean toward it, to hunger for the thing that had a name they would not say. And under the courtyard in the disturbed dark, the starved thing lifted its head at the sudden feast and began, hand over hand, to climb. Hermione, Harry said, finding her at the rail. Feel that? I feel it. It's the dome. They're all looking up at the dome to watch the duels reflected, and they're all wanting the same final, and it's the mirror the size of the sky. She was already pale, already tracking the polished underside of the dome overhead. Get to your anchor points, Harry. Now quietly before it comes, so you have the lines. I'll get to McGonagall. Wednesday's watching the glass. Fleur's near the benches. Go. He went, edging around the rim of the pitch toward the first of the 4 anchor points, mapping his lines to the other 3 as he moved, and he had reached the second when the dome went dark. It happened between one blink and the next. The shield dome overhead, which had held the bright reflection of the whole courtyard, went black, and the reflected crowd in it stopped matching the real one. 300 phantom faces in the black glass overhead turned as one and looked down, not at the pitch, but at Harry, and the reflected sky behind them was not gray and fast, but still and cold and endless, the sky of somewhere under the ground. And out of the center of the dark dome, where the reflection of the empty pitch should have been, a shape began to lower itself into the real courtyard on a long thread of cold, head first, unhurried, wearing Harry's own face, its bird-pale eyes fixed on the real Harry with terrible patience. The crowd screamed. That was the wrong thing to do, and there was no time to tell them. The thing dropped the last 10 feet and landed on the white stone of the dueling pitch, upright in Harry's shape in Harry's reconstruction clothes, and it looked out at the terrified crowd and it drank, visibly growing more solid with every scream, and then it turned to the real Harry and it opened its mouth and said in Harry's own voice, "Come down. You're so tired, let me be the one they want instead. You never asked for any of it. Come down and rest and let me carry it." And it was, for half a second, the most tempting thing he had ever heard, because it was true, because he was tired, because he had never asked for any of it. That was how it worked. It did not lie. It took the truest, ugly thing in you and made it a door. No, Harry said, and did not reach for the door, and reached instead for the 3rd anchor point in his head, keeping his hands moving, keeping his lines. Fleur, the crowd, she was already moving. She came over the rail in a sheet of blue fire, and the fire she threw was not for the crowd and not for the show. It was a working wall of flame that she drove between the manifestation and the screaming benches, cutting off its meal, herding it back toward the empty end of the pitch where there was no one for it to feed on. The thing in Harry's face turned from the vanishing feast, and it was slower now, hungrier, and it fixed on the real Harry as the nearest wanting left in reach. That was when Wednesday got underneath it. She came off her bench low and fast and silent, no wasted motion, and the cold she threw was the killing frost with no flame in it, the one that gave the borrowed shape nothing to grip. Where her cold met Fleur's fire around the thing, they made a box. Fire on the outside to keep the crowd away, cold on the inside to strangle the shape. The manifestation wearing Harry's face turned in the box and looked for a door and found none, and threw itself at the cold wall and recoiled, and threw itself at the fire and recoiled, and began, visibly, to spend itself faster than the frightened crowd could feed it now that the crowd was walled away. It has to go back through reflection, Wednesday called, not loud, level, holding her wall. It can't hold shape out here for long once it's cut off. Break the door and it burns out, Harry, the dome, now. He had his lines. He turned from the box thing and put his back to the fire and reached up with his magic and found the 4 anchor points where the officials had pinned the dome to the courtyard walls, and he unpicked them in sequence fast, as he unset a warding stone 1, 2, 3, and on the fourth the thing in the box screamed in his own voice and threw itself upward toward the door before he could close it, and he closed it 4. And the dark dome lost its shape and its polish and its cold fall sky all at once and came apart into ordinary gray afternoon light, no mirror anywhere, no reflection, no road home. The thing on the pitch, boxed in fire and cold, with the last of its meal cut off and its road home unmade, threw back Harry's head and made a sound that was not Harry's voice and folded inward and was gone. The fire went out, the frost sank. The cold drained out of the white stone, and the ordinary autumn came back into the courtyard, and 300 people sat in the sudden silence, shaking, alive, and stared at the empty pitch where 2 women and a tired man stood back to back to back, breathing hard. It was over in under 2 minutes. Almost. It was almost over. There was a girl on the 3rd tier of the Beauxbatons benches who had not run when the others ran, a small first year with her hands over her mouth, and the manifestation in its last folding half-second had reached out along the one reflective thing left in the courtyard, the water in a fallen jug at her feet, and it had touched her once before it died the way a wave leaves salt. She did not scream. That was the frightening part. She simply went very still and very pale, and her eyes went the flat pale of a bird's for the length of a breath, and then she folded down onto the bench with her hands still over her mouth, cold to the touch, her heart slow, her breath shallow, wanting something in her sleep that no one could hear. Fleur reached her first. She went up the benches 3 at a time and gathered the child into her arms and put her own warmth around her. Blue fire banked to a glow, coaxing heat back into small cold hands, and she said the girl's name over and over, Colette, Colette Reviens, in the voice of a woman who had a little sister, and had once stood on a dock watching someone carry that sister out of black water and had promised herself she would never again be the one who could not reach in time. The girl did not come back. Not all the way. Her breath steadied and her color came up under Fleur's warmth and the healing McGonagall summoned, but her eyes, when they opened, were focused on something a long way off and a long way down, and when they asked her what she wanted, gently over and over, she only whispered him and would not say who, and slept again, cold at the edges, tugging in her dreams toward a stair 4 floors down. They carried her to the hospital wing. The trial was abandoned. The crowd was sent to its houses, subdued and shaking, and worst of all, still faintly hungry, 300 people who had been given a taste of the thing's excitement and did not know why they could not stop thinking about it. Harry stood in the emptied courtyard in the gray light with Wednesday and Fleur, and none of the 3 of them had won the bracket, and none of them cared, and the thing under the castle had reached up through a mirror the size of the sky and taken a child in front of everyone, which meant it was no longer only in the Undercroft, no longer only a cold and a sealed passage, no longer waiting. It touched her through a puddle, Wednesday said. Her voice had gone very flat and very quiet, which he was learning was the sound of her being most dangerous. A fallen jug, standing water the size of my hand. It's not bound to the Undercroft anymore. It's learned to reach through any reflection in the castle that has enough wanting pointed at it. She looked at the fallen jug still lying on its side on the bench, and thing crept out along the stone and stood guard over it, small and grim. That's a new capability. It got it today. It got it from us, from the tournament, from 300 people wanting a fight. We fed it enough to grow a new hand, and it used the new hand to take a child, and I helped. Something moved through the flat of her face that was not interest and was not appetite, and she did not name it, and neither did he. You didn't help it, Fleur said. She had come down from the benches with the child's cold still on her hands, and her pride was entirely gone, burned off, and what stood in its place was harder and older and quieter. We fought it, we boxed it. We saved everyone else in that courtyard because you and I, who are supposed to be enemies, made a wall together without a word, fire and cold, and it held. That is the true thing that happened today, and I will not let you tell yourself the other one. She looked at Wednesday, and it was not kinship anymore. It was further along than that. It was the thing that grows between 2 people who have stood in the same fire. We did that together, and we are going to do it again, bigger, until that child wakes up all the way and the thing that took her is dead. Are we agreed? Wednesday looked at her for a long moment. Thing on the bench kept its silent watch over the fallen jug. We're agreed, she said. God help me, I like you. It's revolting. It is mutual, said Fleur. It is the worst thing that has happened to me all year, and there has been strong competition. Harry looked at the 2 of them, the fire and the frost, standing over a fallen jug in an emptied courtyard, allies now in a way that had cost a child to make, and he understood that the rivalry had not ended so much as it had been outgrown, forced up and out of itself by a thing that ate rivalry, into something none of them had a name for yet. And he understood, too, standing between them with his own tiredness still fresh in his ears and his own voice, that the manifestation had offered him the one thing he wanted most and had almost, for half a second, taken it, and that it would come again, and that next time it would be better and would wear a face he loved instead of his own. It offered me rest, he told them, because Rule 3 cut both ways and he was not going to be the one who broke it. When it wore my face. It said, let me be the one they want, come down and rest, you never asked for any of this, and it was true. That's the part you both need to know. It didn't lie to me. It found the truest thing in me and made it a door, and I nearly walked through it, and the only reason I didn't is I've had a lot of practice being offered easy exits by things that wanted to eat me. He looked at them steadily. So when it comes for me wearing one of your faces, and it will, it's going to say something true. Something I want, and I need you both to know now in daylight that I know that, so you don't spend the whole time it's happening wondering whether I'll fall for it. You wrote it down, Wednesday said. In your own hand, I told you to. I wrote it down. Then you'll be fine. She said it flatly, a fact, a load-bearing thing. You're the only person I've ever met who I trust to refuse the beloved. It's why it's so interesting that you might be mine, or hers. She glanced at Fleur without heat. We'll fight about that later, after. After, Fleur agreed. The hospital wing was quiet and warm and smelled of the burn salve Madame Pomfrey used on everything. Colette Rousseau lay in the end bed under 3 blankets and still shivered, and her older cousin, one of Fleur's students, sat beside her holding a hand that would not warm, and looked up when the 3 of them came in with the particular hope people put on the faces of those who have survived terrible things and are therefore supposed to know how to fix them. She keeps saying a name, the cousin said in French, and Fleur answered her in French, low, and the girl's face crumpled and steadied. Fleur turned back. She's not saying him, Fleur said quietly, so the cousin would not hear the translation. That is what everyone assumed. Colette is 9 years old and away from home for the first time, and what she wants, what the thing found in her and is holding her by, is not a person at all. She keeps saying Mason, home. It found the biggest wanting in a homesick child, and it is holding her under by it, keeping her wanting something she cannot have, because that is the whole of what it does. It does not even need a beloved, it needs only a hunger big enough to drown in. Wednesday stood at the foot of the bed and looked at the cold, small, shivering child with her flat, dark eyes, and Thing climbed down her arm and crept across the blanket and very gently took hold of one of Colette's cold fingers, the way one person holds the hand of another in the dark. Then we give her something to want that she can have, Wednesday said. That's how you break its grip. Not by taking the hunger away, you can't, you replace it with a nearer one. She looked at the cousin and then at Fleur. Tell her someone is coming, tell her a true thing she can want that's close enough to reach. Make the nearer want louder than the far one, and it loses its hold one finger at a time. She looked down at Thing holding the child's hand. It's what it does to us. We can do it back. It only knows one trick. That means we only have to learn one counter. Fleur sat on the edge of the bed and took the child's other hand and bent close and began to murmur in French, something Harry could not follow but understood entirely, a promise of a nearer thing, a thing close enough to want. She told the child, Harry learned afterward, that her mother had already been written to and was already coming, which was true. McGonagall had sent the owl within the hour, and that in the meantime there was hot chocolate, real hot chocolate, being made in the kitchens this minute by a house elf who had heard a French girl was cold, and that all Colette had to do was stay awake long enough to drink it. A small want, a near one, a true one. And the child's shivering eased by a degree, and one cold finger, the one thing was holding, went a little warm. It's working, Hermione breathed from the doorway. She had a book open, of course, and a quill, and she was writing it down because someone had to. You're doing it. You found the counter. Replace the far want with a near one. Harry, that's it. That's the whole shape of the thing. That's how you beat it. You don't fight the hunger. You feed it something smaller and true, and it lets go of the big impossible thing. She stopped and looked up, and her face changed as the implication caught up with her. Oh, that's what it's afraid of. That's why the pages were cut. Someone worked this out 600 years ago, and it terrified them. Because to starve a wanting you have to give the whole castle something real and near to want instead, all at once, and that is the hardest thing in the world to arrange on purpose. Madame Pomfrey brought the hot chocolate herself, and Colette drank half of it before she slept again, and this time she did not shiver, and this time when they asked very softly what she wanted, she said, sleepily, mammon, and then chocolate, and then nothing, and slept like a child and not like a hostage, and every hand in the room went a little less afraid. They stepped out of the hospital wing into the cool of the corridor, and for a moment none of the 3 of them had anything left to say, which was its own kind of intimacy. Harry put his back to the cold stone wall and let it hold him up. The day had gone out of the windows. A single torch burned at the far end, and beyond the glass the lock lay flat and black under the last of the light. I have never, Fleur said to the ceiling conversationally, fought beside someone I intended to defeat. It is a strange sensation. I keep discovering that I do not want you to be hurt, and then remembering that I am supposed to be beating you, and the 2 feelings will not sit in the same chair. It's called respect, said Wednesday. It's very uncomfortable. I've had it 3 times in my life, and I resented all 3. She was cleaning the cold off her wand with a black cloth, methodical, the way a surgeon puts away instruments. The last person I respected, I put a scorpion in his bed. It was the nicest thing I have ever done for anyone, he understood. Do not put a scorpion in my bed, said Fleur. I wouldn't insult you with a scorpion. You're a fire person. It would have to be something that burns. Wednesday considered her with the grave attention she gave to worthy problems. I haven't decided yet. When I do, you'll know it means I've taken you seriously. I will treasure it, Fleur said dryly, and Harry, watching the two of them from the wall, understood that this was flirting in the specific dialect these two spoke, the way other people flirted with flowers, and that he had somehow ended up as the flower they had both come to Scotland to pick, and that the picture should have been ridiculous and was instead something he did not have a safe word for. You're both aware I'm standing here, he said. Vividly, said Fleur. Constantly, said Wednesday. Great. Wonderful, I feel very included. He pushed off the wall because if he stayed against it much longer he was going to slide down it and sleep on the floor. Here's the thing neither of you is saying, so I'll say it because apparently that's my job now. Today was the best day and the worst day. We beat it. We actually beat it in the open in front of everyone, and a 9-year-old is going to be all right because the three of us learned to work together faster than it could feed. That's the best day. He looked at them, the fire and the frost, tired and spent and lit from within by the same hard thing. And it took her anyway. In the 2 minutes it had, it reached out and took a child because we were still one step behind it. That's the worst day. And we don't get to have one of those without the other, not until it's dead. I need you both to be able to hold both of those at once because I can't do this with anyone who only wants the victory or only wants to grieve. I need the people who can carry both. The corridor was quiet. Down the black glass of the window something moved, a paleness surfacing in the dark like a fish rising, and a shape gathered in the reflection that was not any of theirs, a thin figure with its head cocked, and it spoke in a voice that was 3 voices layered wrong, a little of Harry, a little of Fleur, a little of a woman none of them knew, old and cold and grieving. You think you have found the counter, it said from the glass. The near want. The small true thing, you are very clever. The reflection tilted its head the other way. I was clever too, once, before I was only hungry. Ask them what happens to the clever ones down here. Ask the old stones about the woman who wanted and waited and was told to be patient and patient and patient until patience was all there was left of her, and then the patience got hungry. The pale eyes found Harry. Come and see what you become when you want a thing for 600 years and are never once allowed to have it. Come down, I'll show you my face before it was borrowed. I'll show you the last person who tried to save me. No, said Harry evenly to the glass, but thank you for the name. The reflection went still. You just told me you used to be a woman, Harry said. Clever, patient, told to wait. That's more than we had this morning. You're lonely and lonely things talk and you just talked. So that's today's last lesson and you taught it to us for free. He looked at the pale shape with something that was almost against all sense pity. We're not coming down tonight, you'll keep. You've kept 600 years, but we're coming. And when we do, it won't be to feed you. It'll be to let you stop. The pale thing in the glass looked at him for a long moment with its cocked head, and then slowly it sank back down into the dark of the reflection the way a drowned thing sinks, and the window was only a window again, black and flat, with the lock behind it and 3 tired people reflected ordinary in the torchlight. That, said Wednesday very quietly, was the single most attractive thing I have ever watched a person do, and I once saw a man wrestle a bear to a draw. She looked at Harry with her flat, dark eyes gone bright. You made it flinch. Nobody makes a wanting flinch. It made a mistake, coming up here to gloat, and you took the mistake off it clean, and now we know it was a person, a woman, that it wants something specific, that it can be reached. She turned to Fleur. I withdraw nothing. I still intend to win him. Of course, said Fleur. So do I. It would be an insult to stop now after that. She was looking at Harry too, and the fire in her had banked to something steadier and warmer and, if anything, more dangerous for the steadiness. But I will tell you the true thing, Wednesday Addams, because Rule 3, and because you have earned it. If it must be one of us and he chooses you, I will not burn down your school. I will be furious and magnificent, and I will drink an entire bottle of something French and expensive, and then I will be your friend because I have decided you are worth being defeated by. That is the most I have ever conceded to a rival in my life. Do not waste it. Wednesday considered this with the weight it deserved. If he chooses you, she said finally, I will attend the wedding in black, and I will not poison anyone. That is my equivalent concession, and it is enormous. She paused. I may still put something that burns in your bed. As a compliment, you'll know the difference. I look forward to it, said Fleur, and the two of them, the fire and the frost, exchanged a look over Harry's head, the look they had been building toward all day, and it was not friendship exactly, and it was not war any more at all. It was the thing soldiers have and rivals who have become worthy of each other, and it was the last thing on earth the hungry woman in the walls had wanted to make, and she had made it anyway out of them by mistake. Harry looked from one to the other and decided with the small remaining portion of his strength that he was not going to try to name what he felt, because naming it would make it real, and he was too tired to be responsible for it being real tonight. I'm going to sleep for 11 hours, he announced, and neither of you is invited, and that's a rule, and it's Rule 4, and I'm writing it on the wall tomorrow. Rule 4 is unenforceable, said Wednesday. Rule 4 is aspirational, Fleur agreed. Rule 4, said Harry, is the hill I'm choosing, and he left them both there in the torchlight, laughing, or the two nearest things to laughing that either of them ever did, and it was the last easy moment any of them would have for a while. McGonagall found the three of them in the corridor outside, after in the last grey of the afternoon, and she looked at them the way a general looks at the only 3 soldiers who came back from a place she sent them. It is out of the cellars, she said. It was not a question. It reached into my courtyard through a jug of water, and it took a child in front of 2,000 eyes. I cannot seal it under stone now. It is not under the stone. It is in every mirror and every window and every still pool in a castle I cannot drain. Her jaw was tight. Tell me you learned something today worth the price of it. We learned how to beat it, Harry said. Not today, not yet, but we learned the shape. It holds you by the biggest thing you can't have, and you break the hold by giving yourself a real thing you can, small and true and near, the whole castle at once if we have to. He looked at the 2 women beside him, the fire and the frost, and then back at his headmistress. And we learned that the 2 people it's been trying hardest to set against each other just spent a whole afternoon refusing to let it, and saved everyone in that courtyard by doing it. It's not winning, Professor. It thinks it is. It's not. McGonagall looked at the 3 of them for a long moment, and something in her severe old face eased, fractionally, the way a besieged wall eases when the relief column appears on the ridge. Then go down into the Undercroft, she said. All 3 of you together and none of you alone, and find the place it started, the wanting it grew from, the person it used to be. Because you do not starve a thing like this only by feeding the living. Sooner or later you have to go and face the hunger at the root of it. She turned to go and paused and did not look back. Bring each other home. That is the whole of the order. Bring each other home. Chapter 3 and Chapter 4. The wanting the castle began to want things, and the wanting was small at first, which was how you knew it was everywhere. It showed in the corridors in the week after the courtyard. 2 third-years who had been friends since the sorting stopped speaking over a chess set neither of them had cared about a fortnight ago. A Beauxbatons girl wept in a stairwell because a boy from Nevermore had not looked at her, a boy she had exchanged 9 words with in her life. The library ran a waiting list for a single ordinary textbook, and the waiting list produced a shoving match, and the shoving match produced a broken wrist, over a book of which the library held 4 copies. It was nothing. It was 100 nothings. And Harry, who had learned to feel the pressure of the thing below through the soles of his feet, felt the whole castle tilt, very slightly, toward hunger, like a field of flowers turning as one toward a sun that had gone out. It's grazing, Wednesday said. She stood at the window of the 8th-year common room with her hands folded, watching the courtyard below where 2 students Harry didn't know were arguing with the particular heat of people who had forgotten what they were arguing about. Not feasting, grazing. It took a big meal in the courtyard and grew a new reach, and now it's discovered it can sip from everyone at once, a little at a time, all over the castle, through every window and every wet flagstone. Nobody notices losing a little wanting. Everyone notices getting more of it. She turned from the glass. It's fattening the whole herd. By midwinter this castle will be 1,000 people who cannot stop wanting things they don't even like, and it will sit under the stone and drink the lot, and it will be too big to box. We're on a clock now, we weren't before. How long, Harry said. Weeks, not months. She said it flatly, a coroner reading a chart. It's patient, but it's awake, and a thing that's waited 600 years and finally started eating does not go back to sleep. We go down to the root, or we lose the castle a person at a time until there's nothing left up here worth saving. Hermione had turned the 8th-year common room into a war room, and she had done it thoroughly. Every table was buried. She had requisitioned the castle's own building records, the ones the reconstruction office kept, ledgers of stone and ward and payment going back to a time before the ledgers were kept in English, and she had set Ron to reading dates and Luna to reading margins, and she herself had gone at the oldest of them as she went at everything as if it owed her money. Morwenna, she said on the 3rd night into the quiet, and there was something in her voice that made all of them look up. Her name was Morwenna. Morwenna Vane, she was the last warder of the old Undercroft 600 years ago, and I have found her 4 times now in 4 different ledgers, and every single mention of her ends in the middle of a sentence because someone cut the pages. She had a page open under the lamp, a page that survived only because the knife had missed it, a scrap folded into the spine of a stonemason's account book. But they missed this one. Listen, it's a warder's own hand, her hand. She read, and her voice went careful, the way it did over things that were fragile and true. The seal is not a wall but a life, and the life is mine, freely given to hold the deep door until the safer age. I am promised waking. I am promised that when the danger below is spent, I shall be called up out of the stone and released to the life I set aside, and to the one who waits for me in it. I hold to the promise. I will hold to it however long. Let it be recorded that I went down willing, and that I am owed a coming up. The common room was very quiet. Somewhere below them in the cold, the thing that had been Morwenna Vane turned in its long sleep, and the temperature in the room dropped a degree, because it had heard its own name read aloud in a beloved voice for the first time in 6 centuries. She bound her own life into the seal, Hermione said quietly, to hold something worse down in the deep vault, on a promise. They promised her they'd wake her when it was safe and release her and give her back the life she'd set aside and the person she loved. She closed the book with enormous care. And then everyone who made the promise died, in a war or of old age, it doesn't matter. The safer age came, Harry. It came and went. Nobody woke her. Nobody remembered. She held the door for 600 years, waiting to be called up, and no one ever came, and the waiting is what she became. The waiting got hungry. That's the wanting. It isn't a monster that wandered in. It's a promise nobody kept, still waiting to be kept in the dark under our feet. Fleur had gone very still by the fire. She is owed a coming up, she said low in her own accent, tasting the old warder's words. 600 years and no one ever paid what they promised, and now we call her a monster and plan how to kill her. Her jaw was tight. I do not like this story. I do not like being the fourth army sent down to a woman who was only ever left waiting to finish what 6 centuries of cowards started. She's taking children, Wednesday said without heat. Colette, she'd take the whole castle. Whatever she was owed, she doesn't get to collect it out of a 9-year-old. I did not say she should, Fleur returned. I said I do not like it. Both are true. You of all people should understand a thing that is owed something terrible and has decided to take it anyway. The two of them looked at each other, the fire and the frost, and it was not a quarrel, it was the thing that had grown between them, the willingness to say the hard part out loud. We are not going down there to slay a beast, Fleur said. We are going down to keep a promise nobody kept or to end her because we cannot, and I want us all to know which it is before we go because it changes how you fight, whether you are there to kill or to free. We won't know until we see the root, Harry said. But she's right that it matters. He looked at the fire, at the cold page, at the two women who had become, against every expectation, the people he wanted in the room when the truth was hard. We go down to find out what she wanted. If it's something we can give her, we give it, and she stops, and nobody else has to be Colette. If it's something we can't, then we do the other thing, and we do it clean, and we don't pretend she was only ever a beast, because she wasn't, and lying about it is how you become the kind of person who walls a woman into a promise and forgets her. He stood. Either way, we go down together. Rule 1 still holds. Nobody goes down alone. Later, when the war room had emptied and Ron had gone to bed swearing gently about 600 years of paperwork and Hermione had fallen asleep upright over a ledger and been steered to a chair by Luna, Harry went up to the tower for air, and Fleur came with him because she said she did not trust him alone with a high place in a bad mood, and she was not entirely joking. The night was clear and cold and enormous. The loch lay below them full of stars, a second sky, and Fleur stood at the parapet with the wind moving her hair and did not bother to fight it, and for a while neither of them said anything, and the not saying was easy. You are frightened of the wrong thing, she said at last. You are frightened that you will have to choose between her and me. She did not look at him. She looked at the stars in the water. You think about it constantly. I can see it on you. You have decided that whatever happens, one of us ends the year hurt because of you, and you have added it to the list of things you carry, the buildings, the graves, all of it, and you have decided it will be your fault. She turned then, and her face in the starlight was without any of its armor. Stop. It is not your fault, and it is not your job, and you did not ask 2 women to cross a continent and lose their minds over you. We did that. It is ours. You are allowed to simply be wanted, Harry, without it being a debt you have to repay in pain. That's a nice speech, he said. You practice it. On the stairs, twice. She almost laughed. Do not deflect. I told you it was cowardly. I know. He looked at her, at the pale fall of her hair and the fire she kept banked behind her eyes and the fierce, proud, unbearable directness of her, and he did the thing he had been not doing for weeks, which was to stop weighing it. For the record, since we're being honest and there's a rule about it, it's not that I can't feel anything. It's that I feel too much from both directions, and I've spent my whole life having my feelings turned into other people's weapons, so I hold on to them like a man holding his cards against his chest in a room full of thieves. He met her eyes. You're not a thief, neither is she. That's the problem. I keep waiting for one of you to be the trick, and neither of you is. Fleur went still. The wind moved between them. She reached up slowly, giving him every chance to step back and set her palm against the side of his face, warm in the cold, and this time it was not defiance aimed at a monster in the glass. It was only her hand and only him. No trick, she said, just me. Decide when you decide, but do not decide out of guilt, and do not decide never, because never is also a choice, and it is the only one that would actually make me your enemy. He did not step back. The stars burned in the black water below, and the wind came off the loch, and for a moment on the top of the tower, the whole tangled war of the year narrowed down to the warmth of one hand and the choice of whether to turn his head. He turned his head. Her breath went out of her and she came up onto her toes, and the kiss, when it happened, was slow and certain and entirely chosen by both of them in the cold under the enormous sky, and it lasted a long time, and it did not go anywhere the wind could see. What came after they kept to themselves. The tower kept it too. And 4 floors down, the hungry old warder felt a want that had nothing possessive in it, a wanting that was only 2 people choosing each other freely with no wish to own, and it recoiled from the taste the way a starving thing recoils from clean water, because it did not know how to drink a thing that was given instead of grasped. The old warder changed her tactics the next day because she was patient but she was not slow, and she had understood in the recoil from that clean water on the tower that the three of them had found the one thing that could starve her. So she stopped grazing the herd. She turned all of her attention, cold and total, on the three people who had learned to want without grasping, and she set out to teach them to grasp again, one at a time in private, where the others could not see. She came for Wednesday first, which was a mistake, though it took a while to become one. Wednesday found the thing in her own mirror in the guest wing, at the gray hour before dawn when she did her thinking. She had been shaving the edge of a throwing knife to a discipline of sharpness, and she looked up, and her reflection was not shaving a knife. Her reflection was sitting in a black chair in a black room she recognized, the study at home, and beside the reflection in the other chair, real as breakfast, sat Harry, alive and easy in hers, reading with his ankles crossed, entirely at peace in her family's terrible house, entirely chosen, entirely kept. "This is what you want," said the reflection in Wednesday's own flat voice. "Him at home in the dark where nothing can take him, not shared, not fought for. Yours finally, the one open question you ever met, answered and kept and safe on a shelf where you can look at him whenever the world gets loud." The reflection turned its pale eyes on her. "The French one is asleep 3 doors down. I could arrange for her not to wake, nothing so crude as murder. She could simply be called home tonight, an urgent letter, a family matter, gone by morning and never to return, and he would be yours by default, and no one would ever know it was a thing you chose. You wouldn't even have to win him, you'd just have to let me." Wednesday looked at the reflection for a long moment. She set down the knife. The picture was very careful to note, not immune to it. The image in the glass was precise and warm, and it reached the exact cold private place in her that had decided weeks ago that she did not lose and did not share. It was in every measurable way what she wanted. "You've made an error," she told the mirror conversationally. "Two, actually. The first is that you think I want him kept. I don't. A kept thing is a dead thing. It's the entire reason I collect corpses. They hold still and they never surprise me, and they are, for exactly that reason, only interesting once. If you gave me Harry Potter answered and safe on a shelf, he'd be a beetle in a box within the month, beautiful and finished, and I would grieve the open question more than I ever grieved anything, because you would have closed it." She stood and picked up the knife and considered the reflection with genuine clinical interest. "The second error is that you offered to remove her. You think we're rivals, we were, but you spent a whole tournament turning us into allies by accident, and now you've offered to hand me a victory over a woman I've decided to be defeated by, if it comes to that, honestly, on the merits, with him choosing. You've offered me a cheat. I don't cheat, not because I'm good. Because cheating means the game wasn't worth playing, and I only play games that are worth it." She turned the knife once in the light. "You're lonely and you're frightened and you're out of time, and you've just shown me both of those by making an offer that desperate. Thank you. Go back to sleep. We're coming for you soon, and when we do, I'm going to be almost sorry." The reflection's warm study went cold. The image of Harry in the chair looked up, and its eyes were the wrong pale, and it opened its mouth, and Wednesday threw the knife into the glass before it could speak again, and the mirror broke into 100 cold pieces that held, each one for a half-second, a fragment of a black room, and then held nothing at all. She came for Fleur second, and she came the way that would hurt a proud woman most, which was through pity. Fleur was teaching in the practice hall alone at the end of the day, when the tall training mirror along the wall stopped showing 30 imaginary opponents and showed instead a single scene. Fleur older alone in a beautiful empty house, magnificent and admired and profoundly by herself, and the caption the thing wrote under it in the cold of her own understanding was, "This is where the pride ends. You will win every room you enter and lose everyone you leave. He will choose the strange one because the strange one is not afraid of the dark, and you have spent your life being the light, and the light and the dark belong together, and you will be alone, beautiful, forever, the way you have always secretly known you would be." "You want me to grasp," Fleur said to the glass. She did not raise her wand. She stood in the middle of the empty hall with her chin up and let the thing show her the loneliest version of her own future, and she looked at it without flinching because she had looked at worse in real lakes. "You want me to be so afraid of that woman in the empty house that I take him now, however I can, before the strange one does. You want me frightened enough to grasp." She almost smiled, and it was terrible. "You do not know me at all. I have been the most beautiful woman in every room since I was 14 years old, and do you know what that taught me? That being chosen is not the thing. Being chosen is a weather. I have been chosen 1,000 times by people who wanted the light and could not have cared less about the woman holding it, and every one of them left me lonelier than your empty house ever could." She stepped closer to the glass, and the fire came up in her, banked no longer. "I do not want to be chosen, monster. I want to choose, and I have. I choose him freely, whether he chooses me back or not, and I choose her, that impossible funeral of a girl, as the one worthy enough to lose to, and I choose to keep my hands open even if it costs me the empty house you are so sure of. You cannot frighten a woman with loneliness when she has already decided that grasping is the only thing that would truly leave her alone." She raised one hand, and the fire in it was blue at the core. "Now show me the empty house again." I want to burn it down myself, so it is my choice and not your threat." And she did, and the mirror ran with blue fire and cracked from the heat and went dark, and Fleur Delacour stood alone in the practice hall, breathing hard, undefeated, and did not feel lonely at all. She came for Harry last, and she came, as she had promised in the courtyard, wearing a face he loved. He was in the reconstruction at the mouth of the Undercroft stair, alone for the length of time it took to fetch a lamp, which was a mistake, and he knew it was a mistake, and he had done it anyway because he was tired, and the tiredness made him careless, and the cold came up thick and sudden around his feet, and when he turned with the lamp, the woman standing in the passage was his mother. He knew it was not his mother. He had written it down in his own hand over his heart. He knew it the way you know the sun will come up, as a fact you would stake your life on, and it did not help at all, because she was there in the lamplight exactly as the photographs, and better, moving, breathing, looking at him with an ache in her face that no photograph had ever held. "You never got to be a person," she said, in a voice he had never heard and recognized in his blood. "You went straight from being a baby to being a symbol, and you never once got to just be my boy. I can give you that. Come down, time runs strange down here in the deep, in the dark. I can give you an afternoon. A whole afternoon, the one you never had, the two of us, and no war and no castle, and no one wanting anything from you at all except that you sit still and let your mother look at you." Her eyes shone. "You've earned an afternoon, Harry. You've earned 1,000 of them. Come down and take one, that's all, just one." It was the cruelest thing anyone had ever offered him, and it was, for a long, terrible moment, the most tempting, and the tears that came to his eyes were entirely real, because the want was real. It was the oldest and truest want in him, and she had reached all the way down to the bottom of him and taken it in her cold hands and held it up in the lamplight wearing his mother's face. "You spelled it wrong," he said. The thing wearing Lily Potter's face went still. "My mother," Harry said, and his voice did not shake, which cost him more than anything had cost him in a long time, "would never in her life tell me to come down into the dark. She went into the dark so I wouldn't have to. That was the whole point of her. That was the last thing she ever did." He set the lamp down on the stone carefully so his hands would have something to do. "You had all the pictures right, the face, the voice, the ache. But you don't understand her because you don't understand the thing she had that you never did, which is that she wanted me to live more than she wanted me at all. You only know how to want someone toward you. She knew how to want someone away into the light even when it cost her everything. That's the difference between her and you. That's the difference between love and a wanting. And I'm sorry because I think you had it once 600 years ago before the waiting ate it, but you don't have it now. So no," he picked the lamp back up. "I'm not coming down, not because you offered me a lie, because you offered me the truest thing I have, and you still got it wrong, and that's how I know." The thing in his mother's face looked at him with 600 years of grief in eyes that were the wrong pale, and for a moment, just a moment, it was not triumphant and it was not cold, it was only unbearably, anciently sad. "Nobody came for me," it said, in a small voice that was almost more than his own. "I held the door, I held it so well, and nobody ever came." "I know," Harry said. "I read your page, you went down willing in your ode to coming up." He held the lamp between them, a small light in a great dark. "We're coming, not to feed you, to keep the promise. Hold the door a little longer, we're almost there." The cold drew back down the stair, slow, uncertain, and the passage was empty, and Harry stood alone at the mouth of the dark with a lamp and wet eyes and the docket over his heart, and he did not go down, and he did not fall, and it was the hardest thing he had done all year, and he had done a great many hard things. He was still standing there when the alarm went up in the castle above, thin and distant and climbing, the sound of a great many people beginning all at once to want the same thing too much. He took the stairs 3 at a time toward the sound. It was coming from the great hall, and it was the wrong sound entirely, not screaming, not panic, but a low and terrible murmur, the sound of 100 people all saying please at once. And when Harry came through the doors he stopped, because the hall was full of students and every single one of them was walking slowly toward the tall dark windows along the western wall, hands out, faces slack and yearning, murmuring to the glass the names of things they could not have. The windows had gone black and endless, a row of them, each a door into the same cold nowhere, and in each one a pale shape stood with its head cocked, holding out its arms, and the students went to it the way iron goes to a magnet, unhurried, certain, wanting, and the first of them had already reached the glass and pressed their palms to it and begun, gently, to freeze. Fleur was already there. She had come from the practice hall, and she had a wall of blue fire up along the base of the windows, a burning line the sleepwalkers could not cross, and she was holding it and shouting names, trying to wake them, and it was not working, because you cannot wake a person from a want by frightening them. Fear is only another hunger, and the thing drank it too. Wednesday came through the far doors at a dead sprint with Thing on her shoulder and Hermione behind her with a book she had given up on, and Ron with his wand out and no idea where to point it, and McGonagall's voice cracking uselessly over the murmur, ordering prefects who were themselves drifting toward the glass. "The fire's not enough," Wednesday said, arriving at Harry's side, flat and fast. "She can hold them off the windows, but she can't turn them around, and there are 300 of them, and the ones at the back are climbing over the ones in front to get to the glass. It's It's got the whole hall wanting at once. This is the meal it's been building to. If it lands this, it grows too big to fight. Then we don't fight it, Harry said. We do the counter. Colette, the hot chocolate, the near true thing. He grabbed her arm. It's holding 300 people by the biggest impossible want in each of them. We can't reach 300 separate wants, but we don't have to. We give the whole hall one near, true, shared thing to want instead, all at once, louder than the far one, and it lets go of all of them together. What does a whole hall want that's near and true and the same for everyone? Wednesday demanded. Harry looked at the drifting, murmuring crowd, at the sleepwalkers pressing toward the cold, at Fleur burning herself out holding a line, at Ron white-faced and holding his ground anyway, at a 9-year-old who had wanted only to go home, and he understood the answer as he understood most true things all at once and too late to be clever about it. Each other, he said. They want each other. Every person in this room has someone in this room they'd cross the floor for. That's the near true thing. It's the only want strong enough, and it's already here. He turned to her. I can't reach 300 people, but you can put a cold through this floor that everyone feels at once, and he pointed at Fleur, can put a warmth through it right behind, and between the two of you can make 300 people feel in their feet in 1 second exactly how cold this hall is about to get, and exactly how much warmth is standing next to them. You can make them turn to the person beside them instead of the glass. Do it together. Cold, then warm. Now. Wednesday did not waste a breath asking whether it would work. She dropped to one knee and put both palms flat on the stone and drove the cold down and out. A wave of it, the deep grave cold of the undercroft, turned back on itself and sent racing through the flagstones of the great hall, and 300 sleepwalkers felt the floor go to ice beneath them and stopped and shuddered, and for 1 second the want in them was drowned under a simpler, older animal message. You are cold, you are in danger, find warmth. Fleur, who had understood the instant Harry pointed at her, let the wall of blue fire drop and sent its heat down into the same stone, right behind the cold, a wave of warmth that rose up through 300 pairs of feet with a single, unmistakable direction. And every person in that hall, cold to the bone and desperate for heat, turned all at once away from the glass and toward the nearest warm living body, and found a friend, a sister, a stranger, a hand, and grabbed it and held on. The murmur broke. 300 people stopped saying please to the windows and started saying are you all right to each other, and the wanting in the hall turned in the space of a breath, from 1,000 lonely impossible hungers pointed at the cold into one warm near true thing shared between everyone at once, and the pale shapes in the windows threw back their heads and the black glass shattered, every window along the western wall, all at once, outward into the night. Because the thing behind them could not hold a door open against a room that had stopped wanting what it was selling. The cold went out of the hall like a tide. The students stood blinking in the sudden ordinary torchlight, holding on to each other, not knowing why, and Madame Pomfrey and the prefects moved among them, and the ones who had reached the glass first were cold and shaken but alive, warming in the arms of whoever had turned to catch them, and no one this time, no one at all, was taken. Fleur sat down on the floor where she stood, spent, her fire guttered to nothing, and Wednesday knelt on the cold stone with her palms scraped raw and her braids come loose, and the two of them looked at each other across the emptying hall, wrecked and triumphant, and Harry crossed to them through the wreckage of glass and the crowd of people holding on to people, and he crouched down between the two women who had just saved 300 lives with a single second of cold and a single second of warmth. And he did not say anything clever. That's it, Hermione breathed, arriving, her book forgotten, her face alight. That's the whole spell. That's how you kill a wanting, not with fire, not with cold, with those two things together, aimed at the truth, at the near thing everyone can actually have. Cold to break the false want, warmth to give the true one. Harry, you did it at the scale of a hall. If we can do it at the root, at the source, at her, she pointed down at the stone, at the deep, we don't have to kill her. We break her false want, the impossible one, the 600-year one, and we give her a near true thing instead, one she can actually have, and she lets go, and it's over, and nobody has to die, not her, not us, not Colette, nobody. And what, said Wednesday from the floor, wiping blood from her palms with the black cloth, is the near true thing you give a woman who has wanted, for 600 years, the one thing nobody ever came to give her? What do you offer a broken promise that it can actually have? The hall was quiet around them. Outside, through the shattered windows, the night came in cold and clean off the lock. Her coming up, Harry said, that's what she's owed, that's what she's wanted the whole time, not a person. Not revenge, just to be called up out of the stone, as she was promised, and released and let go. He looked at the two of them, the fire and the frost, ruined and holding on the floor of a hall they had just saved. She went down willing, and she's owed a coming up, and everyone who could have given it to her died 600 years ago, so we go down, and we give it to her. We keep the promise nobody kept, that's the near true thing, that's the whole spell. We go down into the deep, and we tell a woman who has waited 6 centuries in the dark that we came, that someone finally came, and we call her up and we let her rest. Nobody said anything for a moment. Then Ron, standing over the three of them with his wand still in his hand, said roughly, that's either the maddest plan I've ever heard or the only decent one, and knowing this lot, it's both. And Luna, drifting up beside him through the glass and the crowd, said dreamily, it's both. The good plans always are. She's been listening, you know. She heard you. She's very frightened and very tired, and she doesn't believe you yet, but she heard you. And the temperature of the ruined hall dropped 1 degree and rose again, as if something 4 floors down had turned over and listened and let itself, for the first time in 600 years, begin a hope. McGonagall came to them through the wreckage, and she looked at the shattered windows and the shaken students and the 3 young people on the floor, and she did not ask what had happened, because she had watched enough of it to understand, and she knelt stiffly on the cold stone, which none of them had ever seen her do, and she put a hand on Harry's shoulder and a hand on Fleur's and looked at Wednesday, who did not permit hands, with a respect that was its own kind of touch. "Go down," she said, "tonight. Now while she is listening, while she is tired, while the promise is fresh in the air and you 3 are the ones who put it there. Do not wait for morning. Morning is when the fear comes back and hope goes cold." She rose, and she was McGonagall again, iron and certain. "Take what you need from the stores. Take no one who is not the 3 of you, because rule 1 holds, and I will not send children into the deep to be wanted. And Potter," she looked at him, "you will not go first, I know you. You will decide somewhere on those stairs that if anyone is to be the lure it should be you, that you will walk ahead and let her want you toward the root so the 2 of them are safe. You will not. She wants you most of all 3, and if she gets you alone in the deep with your mother's face waiting, I do not care what you wrote over your heart. You will go in the middle between the fire and the frost, where they can reach you, and that is not a suggestion, and if you argue I will bind your feet to Miss Granger and send her down with you, and none of us wants that." Harry looked at her and at the 2 women on the floor beside him, ruined and unbroken, who had already turned their heads to hear his answer, and he understood that being cared for this fiercely by this many people was its own kind of weight, and that he was, for once, willing to carry it. "In the middle," he agreed, "between them, I promise." "Good," said McGonagall. "Then go and keep a promise, all 3 of you, that this castle has owed a brave woman for 600 years, and bring each other home." That is still the whole of the order, bring each other home. They gathered what they needed in the cold hour before the deeper cold, the 3 of them in the reconstruction, at the mouth of the stair that went down into the dark where a warder had held a door for 6 centuries waiting for someone to come. Fleur banked her fire low and steady. Wednesday checked her knives and her frost and set Thing on her shoulder as a scout. Harry took the lamp and the docket over his heart and the promise in his mouth, and he stood at the top of the stair between the 2 women who had claimed him and had, somewhere in the fighting, stopped trying to win him and started, without either of them saying so, to simply stand beside him, and he looked down into the dark that had wanted him since the night he arrived. "Whatever's down there," he said, "wears faces we love, we know that now. So we hold on to each other, and we don't believe anything that isn't standing where we can touch it, and we keep the promise, and we come back up." All 3 agreed. "Agreed," said Fleur. "Agreed," said Wednesday, and Harry. She looked at him with her flat dark eyes, and Thing gripped her shoulder, and far below them the cold breathed up out of the deep. "If it wears my face down there, and it will, remember that the real me would never once tell you it was easy. Whatever promises you it's easy as her. I only ever tell you it's worth it. There's a difference. Hold on to the difference." And the 3 of them went down into the dark together, between the fire and the frost, to keep a promise 600 years unpaid, and above them the ruined castle held its breath, and below them, in the deep in the cold, an old warder heard 3 sets of footfalls coming down her stair at last, coming down after all this time coming, and did not know whether to reach for them or to run. Chapter 4 and Chapter 5. Undercroft the stair went down further than a castle should have room for. They had reckoned 4 floors from the reconstruction plans, but the plans were a lie the way all the records were a lie, edited by 6 centuries of people who wanted the deep forgotten, and the stair kept going past where 4 floors should have ended, down into stone that got older as they descended, the neat courses of the founders' masons giving way to rougher work, and that giving way at last to stone that was not cut at all but shaped, smoothed by hands or by water or by will. Walls that curved where no mason curves them. The lamp threw their 3 shadows huge and wavering up the stone. Thing rode on Wednesday's shoulder, one finger raised, feeling the air. The cold came up to meet them like a host who had been expecting guests for a very long time. "The wards change here," Harry said, at a landing where the stair doubled back on itself. He put his palm flat to the wall, reading, and the old grammar of the warding came up under his fingers, worn and strange and beautiful. "This isn't defensive work, this is holding work. Every stone from here down is part of the seal. We're not walking through a castle anymore, we're walking down the inside of a spell." He took his hand off the wall, "And the spell knows we're here. It's been reading us since the first step. It knows who we are, it knows who we've lost. Then it will use them," Fleur said. Her banked fire lit her from below, and she kept it low and steady, a discipline. "As it did upstairs, it will show us the dead." Agreed. "Rule, we do not believe anything that is not standing where we can touch it. If you see someone you love, you take the hand of whoever is beside you, and you say their name aloud, the living one, and you keep walking." "Yes, yes," said Harry. "Yes," said Wednesday, and then, because she did not leave true things unsaid, "And if I go quiet, if I stop talking, that is when you worry about me, because the version of me that has fallen for something is the version that has nothing to say." The real me always has something to say, usually unkind, hold on to that. They went down. The dead came, as promised. Harry saw Sirius on a landing, laughing, holding out a hand, and he took Fleur's instead and said her name and kept walking, and it cost him, and he paid it. Fleur saw her grandmother and a boy she had loved at 15 who had died in the war, and she burned past them without slowing, her jaw tight, her fire steady. And the dead came for Wednesday too, though hers were stranger. A whole procession of the people she had known who had ended, arranged by the thing in an order that was almost a courtship. Here is everyone you failed to keep, come and keep them now. And she looked at every one of them with her flat dark eyes and named the living instead, Harry, Fleur, and kept her feet on the stair. It was on the 9th or the 90th landing, they had all stopped counting, that the passage tried to take them apart. It was subtle. That was the frightening thing about the deep, that it did nothing so crude as a wall between them. The stair simply widened without any of them noticing the moment it began, and the dark grew a little between the three of them, and each of them found they had drifted a step apart and then two, and then the lamp seemed to shrink, and each of them was walking down a slightly different stair in a slightly different dark toward a slightly different landing where a slightly different beloved waited, and none of them had chosen it, and it had happened while they were being brave about the dead. Harry felt the others go thin beside him, felt the cold sliding where their warmth had been, and he did the thing they had agreed, which was that he stopped, and he reached out into the widening dark on both sides, and he did not find them. Hands, he said, not loud, level. Now, reach, don't look for me, reach. He felt Fleur's hand find his first, warm, gripping hard, and then a terrible second later, Wednesday's, cold and small and certain, and he pulled. And the three of them came back together on the stair with a wrench that was almost physical, and the widened dark narrowed, and the lamp came back up bright, and the different stairs collapsed into the one stair they were actually standing on, and the cold drew back, foiled. It doesn't want to fight us, Wednesday said, breathing hard, not letting go of his hand. It wants to separate us. It knows it can't take three people who are holding on. It can only take one alone. That's the whole game down here. It's not going to throw a monster at us. It's going to spend the entire descent patiently trying to make us let go of each other, and the moment any one of us is alone in the dark, it wins. She looked at their three joined hands in the lamplight, fire and frost and the tired man between, and something in her face did the thing it did, the ghost of the thing. So we don't let go, even when it's inconvenient, even when one of us needs both hands, we find another way, we do not let go. They went down holding on after that, and it was slower, and it was harder, and it worked. They rested once because even fear runs out of fuel, on a wide landing where the shaped stone opened into a kind of gallery, and the cold, for whatever reason, was thinner. Fleur set a low fire on the stone, a real one which she had carried down for exactly this, because she said a person who has forgotten what warmth looks like will forget what they are fighting for, and the three of them sat close around it in the enormous dark, and for a little while the deep let them be, the way a cat lets a mouse rest so the game lasts longer. Wednesday sat next to Harry, closer than the fire required, and Thing had gone to sit with Fleur, who had developed with it a wordless understanding that neither of them would explain, and for a moment it was almost only two people by a fire at the bottom of the world. You held my hand back there before you held hers, Wednesday observed, quietly, only for him, in the dark when it split us. You reached for her first and then me, and I want you to know I noticed, and I want you to know it didn't hurt, which surprises me because a month ago it would have, and I would have done something about it that you would have read about later. She looked into the fire, her profile grave and pale. You reach for the warmth first, of course you do. You're cold all the time on the inside in a way she'll never understand because she's never once been cold. She'll warm you, I know that, I've watched it. It's good for you, pause. I'm not the warmth, Harry, I'm never going to be. What I am is the person who'll go into the dark with you and not need a light because I can see fine down here, this is my weather. She'll keep you warm, I'll keep you company in the places she can't follow. Those aren't the same thing and they aren't in competition, and it took me until this stare to understand that, which is the longest it has ever taken me to understand anything. He looked at her, small and certain in the firelight at the bottom of the world, and he understood that she had just in her way said the most generous thing she had ever said to anyone, and that it had cost her the thing she prized most, which was the certainty that she did not lose. Wednesday, he didn't reach for a joke, she'd have hated it. You keep telling me what you are like you're warning me off, like if you describe yourself accurately enough I'll have the decency to be scared. He held her flat dark gaze in the firelight. I'm not scared, I know exactly what you are. You're the person who cut my tripline the first night because it would have got me killed, and told me about the monster before it started so I'd know you never lied, and warned me against your own face in the dark just now in case it saved my life. You keep doing the most loyal things I've ever seen and calling them warnings. He shook his head. I don't want the warmth instead of you. I want the warmth and the company. I'm greedy like that. I've had a hard life and I've decided I'm owed. Something happened in her face that he had never seen, a crack right through the flat of it, there and gone, and she looked at him in the firelight at the bottom of the world with 6 centuries of the deep pressing on the stone above them. and she leaned in, slow, giving him every chance, the way Fleur had on the tower, because both of them, it turned out, for all their fire and all their frost, would not take a thing that was not freely turned toward them. He turned toward her. The kiss was nothing like the tower. It was quieter and colder, and it went all the way down, and it lasted. And across the fire Fleur watched it happen and did not look away and did not burn, because Rule 3, because she had known, because a want given freely does not feed the thing in the walls, and the three of them at the bottom of the world in the cold made the deep go hungry a second time, and did not care who was watching, because there was nothing to win any more, only people to hold on to. What came after, in the thin warmth by the small fire, they kept to themselves, and the dark kept it too, and did not understand it, and went hungry and grew 4 steps down, more afraid. The deep stopped being subtle 2 turns below the fire. They felt it change before they saw it. The cold, which had been patient, went eager. The shaped stone of the walls began to sweat a thin black damp that was not water, and the damp caught the lamplight and threw it back wrong. 100 small reflections in the sheen of the walls, and in every one of them a pale shape stood watching, and the reflections did not stay in the walls. They peeled. One by one, along the length of the passage, the pale watchers stepped out of the wet stone into the air, thin and gray, and wearing, each of them, a face one of the three had lost, and they gathered on the stair below, between the living and the deep, a whole silent crowd of the beloved dead, and they lifted their arms, and they did not speak, and they came up the stair. "It's given up on stealth," Wednesday said. She had a knife in each hand. "It's going to try to overwhelm us with the ones we can't hit. Nobody can raise a wand against their own mother. It knows that. That's the weapon, not claws, grief." "Then we don't hit them," Harry said. "They're not real. They're reflections that walked out of the wet. They're made of the sheen on the walls." He looked at the black damp weeping down the stone, at the light caught in it, at the crowd of the dead gathering shape from it, and he found the pattern as he found all patterns from the inside. Fleur. The walls are wet, and the wet is a mirror, and the mirror is where they're coming from. Dry the walls, burn the sheen off the stone, take away the surface, and they've got nothing to peel out of. Fleur understood in the space of a breath. She did not throw her fire down the stair at the crowd of the dead, which was what the deep wanted, which would have been a living woman burning the faces of the beloved and feeding the thing a feast of horror. She threw it at the walls. She sent a sheet of blue flame up both sides of the passage, along the weeping stone, and the fire drank the black damp and dried the sheen to nothing. And the mirror that the deep had grown along its own throat went dull and dead, and the pale crowd of the dead mid-step, with nothing left to peel out of, thinned like breath on cold glass, and was gone, all of them, between one footfall and the next, back into a wall that no longer held their reflection. The passage steamed. The cold reeled. And the deep denied its grief, did the thing a cornered thing does, which was to stop being clever and start being strong. The stone shook. Not the small shudder of the castle settling, but a deep grinding heave, as if something very large far below had turned over and pressed up against the underside of the world, and the whole shaped throat of the seal groaned around them, and from below, from the dark past the reach of the lamp, came a sound none of them had heard before, a vast slow intake, the sound of 6 centuries of hunger drawing a breath. "The seal's failing," Harry said. He had his palm to the wall again, and he could feel it, the old holding grammar straining, threads of it snapping one by one further down. "She's losing her grip. Whatever she's been holding, it's pushing, and every second we've spent down here has cost her, and she's frightened of us, and a frightened warder is a warder about to let go." He took his hand off the shaking wall. "We're not the danger down here. We never were. The danger is what happens if she lets go before we reach her. We have to get to the root, now, fast, before she gives up." They ran. They ran down the last of the stairs, the deep heaved around them, down through a dark that pressed and grabbed and wept, and Wednesday went first because she could see in it, and Harry went in the middle because he had promised, and Fleur came last with fire streaming from her hand to keep the walls dry and dead behind them, and the stair poured them out at last, at the very bottom of the world, into the seal heart. It was a chamber, round, older than any stone above it, and it had been beautiful once. The walls were graven, floor to unseen ceiling, with the holding grammar, tens of thousands of runes cut by a single patient hand over what must have been years, a whole life's work of warding turned inward on a single point, and the point was the center of the room, where a low, round well of black stone held, suspended above its own dark, a figure. She hung in the air above the well, half in the stone and half out of it, a woman made of the seal itself, her body the graven runes, her hair the black weeping damp, her hands, her 2 hands, pressed flat and desperate against a great dark door in the floor of the well beneath her. A door that had no handle and no hinge, a door that bulged upward against her palms with the slow, vast pressure of the thing that drew breath below, and she was holding it shut, she was still holding it shut. After 600 years, and the effort of it was written in every straining rune of her. She turned her head when they came in. Her face was the only part of her that was still entirely a woman's, worn and gray and ancient and lovely, and her eyes were the flat pale of a bird's, and they were also underneath, unbearably, a person-s, and she looked at the 3 of them standing in the doorway of her prison, come down at last after 600 years, and she did the thing none of them had braced for. She wept. "You came," said Morwen Yvain, in a voice like a key turning in a lock rusted shut for centuries. You came down after all this time, someone came. And then her worn gray face crumpled and the flat pale went out of her eyes for a moment and left only the woman, and the woman said in a smaller voice, the voice of a girl who has been brave alone for too long, "You have to go back up, please, you have to go back up right now. Because I am so glad you came that I am going to want you to stay, and if I want you to stay I will take you. I will not be able to help it, I have never once been able to help it, and then you will be down here with me forever and no one will ever come again." Her hands shook against the bulging door. "That is what I do now, I take the ones who come. I have been trying so hard not to take you. All this way down I have been trying to send you back, but you kept holding on to each other, you clever, cruel children, and now you are here, and I am so tired and I want, and I do not know how to stop." "Then we'll teach you," Harry said, and he did not run back up the stair, and he took one step into the seal heart, into the reach of a woman who took the ones who came, because someone had to be the first to walk toward her in 600 years instead of away. "We didn't come down to be taken, Morwenna, and we didn't come down to kill you. We came down to keep the promise. You went down willing, and you're owed a coming up, and we came to give it to you, all of us, look." He gestured slowly at the two women beside him, the fire and the frost. "Not one person, 3. Enough of us to hold the door while you let go. Enough of us that you don't have to be alone with it for one more second. We came to relieve the watch." The old warder stared at him with her terrible pale eyes and her weeping woman's face, and her hands pressed the bulging door. And behind him Fleur banked her fire, and Wednesday set her knives away, and Thing crept out onto the graven floor, and the thing that drew breath below the door heaved up against Morwenna's failing hands, and time in the seal heart at the bottom of the world ran very short indeed. "Tell us," Fleur said, and she came forward to stand at Harry's shoulder, and she did not raise her fire, she lowered it, until the seal heart was lit only by her hands held open and glowing soft, the least threatening thing a woman of fire could make of herself. "Tell us what is behind the door, tell us what you are holding. We cannot help you let go of a thing we do not understand, and we did not come 600 years late to guess." Morwenna looked at the open glowing hands, and something in her ancient face eased, a fraction, the way a lock eases before it turns, and she told them. And as she told it, the graven walls of the seal heart lit, rune by rune, and showed them, so that they did not only hear the story, they stood inside it. She had been the last warder, and she had been young, and she had loved a man named Eden who cut stone, and the two of them were going to have a life in the light in the ordinary world, when the Founder's circle came to her with the thing they had found in the deep. Not a demon, not a beast, a door. A place in the world worn thin by too much dying, up which the hunger of the dead pressed, the want of everyone who had ever wanted and been denied, pooling and rising, a flood of pure covetous grief that would drown the living in longing if it ever came up. They needed it held. They needed a warder to bind a living will into a seal and hold the door shut, because a spell alone would fail, and only a person could keep choosing every second to hold. And they promised her, all of them, on everything they held sacred, that it would be for an age only, that when a safer working was devised she would be called up, released, given back her life and her Eden and the light. She went down willing. She was 22. She held the door. The safer working was never devised, because working on a problem is tedious and forgetting it is easy, and the founders died and their students died, and the promise passed from mouth to mouth, getting smaller each time until it was a rumor and then a footnote and then a cut page. And Eden, who had not forgotten, who never forgot, came down for her. Once. 40 years in, an old man by then, he came down the stair she was bound beneath, alone, to keep the promise no one else would keep, to bring her up himself or die trying. He died trying. He died on the stair, within sight of the seal heart, within sight of her, of old age and cold and the long climb down, reaching for her, and she felt every second of it, bound in the stone, unable to lift her hands from the door to catch him, unable to go to him, forced to choose in the worst moment of 600 years between the door and Eden, and she chose the door, because if she let go the flood would take the whole world, including his grave. And so she held the door and watched the only person who ever came for her die, reaching for her hand, 6 feet away, and she could not close the gap. "And I understood," said Morwenna in her rusted key voice, her pale eyes streaming, her hands pressed to the bulging door, "that everyone who comes for me dies reaching. That the promise is a lie, not because people are cruel, but because the deep is patient and people are not, and the ones who love me will always die on the stair, always, forever, 6 feet short. So I stopped waiting to be saved. I started saving them instead. When someone came near, I took them, I pulled them down to me before the stair could kill them. I kept them safe with me in the cold where nothing could make them die reaching." Her face broke. "I told myself it was mercy. It is not mercy, it is the hunger wearing mercy's face. I have taken children. I took a little French girl who only wanted her home. I know what I am. But I cannot stop, because the alternative is to let them climb the stair, and the stair kills the ones who love me. It always kills them, and I would rather take them than watch one more person die 6 feet short of my hand." The seal heart was silent. The graven walls went dark again. Above them the whole castle waited, and below the door bulged, and the three of them stood in the terrible middle of a 600-year-old grief that had learned to call itself love. Hermione's counter turned over in Harry's mind, cold to break the false want, warmth to give the true one, and he saw all at once the shape of the trap in it. The false want was clear enough. She wanted to keep the ones who came so they would not die on the stair. That was the impossible, hoarding, drowning want, and cold could break it. But the near true thing, the warm thing they had to give her in its place, was the hard part, because what she was owed, her coming up, her release, meant lifting her hands from the door, and if she lifted her hands the flood came up unless someone else was holding it, and the only way to hold it was to bind a living will into the seal, which meant the near true thing they had to offer Morwen Vane was for one of them to take her place. That's the trap, Wednesday said quietly. At the same moment he understood it, because she was as fast as he was and colder about it. That's why the pages were cut, not to hide how to kill her, to hide how to free her, because the only way to free her is for one of us to go into the stone in her place, and no one who worked that out was willing to write down an instruction that ended in a volunteer. She looked at the bulging door, at the flood pressing up, at the graven walls that had eaten a young woman's whole life. You cannot break the seal. If you break it, the flood takes the castle. You cannot force her out. If you force her, the flood takes the castle. The only way anyone leaves this room is if someone else stays, and stays willing, and holds the door and starts counting the centuries. Her flat, dark eyes moved once to Harry, and away, fast, before he could read what was in them. And I know exactly which of us is already deciding it should be him. Wednesday, no, she rounded on him, and her voice did not rise, which was how he knew. No, you listen to me, because I am about to tell you a true thing, and I only ever tell you true things, so you had better weigh it properly. If you go into that stone, Harry Potter, if you decide that the noble thing, the hairy thing, is to trade your life for hers and hold this door for 600 years so a castle full of strangers can sleep, then you will have done to yourself the exact thing that was done to her. You will go down willing on a promise, and everyone who made the promise will die, and in 400 years you will be the thing in the walls, wearing our faces, taking children, because that is what this room does to volunteers. It does not reward them, it eats them slowly and turns their love into a hunger. She was very close to him now, cold and fierce and entirely certain. I did not cross a continent and lose my mind over the one open question I ever met so that you could close yourself into a wall to prove you were worth loving. You are already worth loving. You do not have to die reaching to earn it. Do you understand me? For once in your life, do not be the one who goes into the dark so the others don't have to. The door heaved. A crack ran up the black stone of the well with a sound like a bone giving, and the vast slow breath below became, for the first time, a pull, a suction, the flood testing its lid, and Morwen cried out and pressed down with hands that were failing, and the pale went bright and hungry in her eyes despite everything, despite her weeping, despite her will, because a wanting that senses the ones it loves in danger does the only thing it knows how to do. Go up, Morwen sobbed. Go up, I cannot hold it and hold myself. I am going to take you. I am going to take the one who died and came back because he is the only one strong enough to hold the door, and I want him. I want him to stay. Oh, forgive me, I cannot stop it. I want him to stay. And she took Harry. It was not like being grabbed. Harry had been grabbed. This was worse because it came from inside. The want reached into him and found the oldest thing at the bottom of him, the wish to be kept, to be safe, to stop, to be held somewhere nothing could reach him, the wish he had spent his whole life refusing, because refusing it was the only way he had ever gotten anything done, and it took that wish in both cold hands and pulled, and his feet left the graven floor and he went toward the well. He did not go quietly. He got one hand out and caught the lip of the black well and held, arm shaking, the pull dragging at the very center of him, and he heard Wednesday's voice from a long way off saying his name, not the false easy version, the real one, unkind and frightened and true, and he held onto the sound of it. Then two hands closed on him. Fleur had his right arm in both of hers, boots braced on the graven stone, hauling back with everything she had and losing ground. Wednesday had his left, knives forgotten, both cold, small hands locked around his wrist, and she was not strong enough, and neither was Fleur, and both of them knew it, and neither of them let go. Because that was the rule, the only rule, we do not let go, and the three of them hung there at the lip of the well, the fire and the frost and the one between, and the want pulled, and the door cracked, and the flood pressed up against Morwen's failing hands with a sound like the sea. You can't outpull it, Harry got out through his teeth. It's not a rope, it's a want. You can't win a want by pulling harder. Let me. If you say let me go, I will follow you into that stone and haunt you, Wednesday snarled. I wasn't going to say let go. The pull dragged at him, and he stopped fighting the direction of it, which was the hardest thing, and turned it, as he turned a hammer's force, sideways instead of square. I was going to say let me reach her, not the door, her. Swing me toward her, both of you, toward Morwen, trust me, swing. And they trusted him, which was its own small miracle, two women who trusted almost no one. And instead of hauling him back from the well, they threw him the other way, forward into it, toward the weeping woman bound above the door. and the want that had been pulling him met the sudden slack and faltered, confused, and in the half-second of its confusion Harry got both his hands not on the door but on Morwenna's face, on the worn gray woman's face of her, the one part that was still a person. And he held it the way you hold the face of someone about to go under, and he said the only thing he had. He didn't die reaching for your hand, Harry said. Eden, he didn't. I read your walls, Morwenna, they showed us, and you've been telling yourself the story wrong for 600 years because you were the only one down here to tell it. Her pale eyes fixed on him, streaming, and the pull loosened another degree. He didn't die reaching for your hand, he died having reached it. He came down the whole stair, an old man, alone, and he got to you. He got all the way to the seal heart, close enough to see your face, and the last thing he saw before the cold took him was that you were still there, still holding, still exactly the woman he came for. He didn't die 6 feet short, he died having found you. You've been grieving the wrong death for 6 centuries. He wasn't reaching, he'd arrived. Morwenna Vane made a sound that no living throat could have made, and the flat pale went out of her eyes all the way out and left only the woman, 22 years old under 600 years of dark, and her hands on the door trembled, and the want that had hold of Harry let go of him all at once, dropped him, because for one whole second Morwenna Vane was not hungry. She was only a girl who had just learned that the one she loved had reached her after all. Harry fell against the lip of the well. The 2 women hauled him back onto the graven floor, all 3 of them down in a heap on the cold stone, breathing, alive, holding on. And above them the door bulged, unheld now, because Morwenna's hands had come off it in her grief, and the crack ran wide, and the flood roared up toward the lid it had waited 600 years to breach. Harry got his hands on the door. He did it before he could think about it and before either of them could stop him, and it was not the noble sacrifice Wednesday had warned him against. He told himself even as he did it. It was a stopgap, only a stopgap, his palms flat on the cold, bulging stone beside Morwenna's, holding the lid down with her, the 2 of them, the survivor and the warder, and the flood met 4 hands where it had expected none and sank back, snarling, a foot below the lid held. The seal heart went quiet. The roar became a press. Morwenna stared at her own hands beside his on the door, and at the girl she had just remembered being, and at the 3 impossible children who had come down her stair and refused to die on it, and she did not take them, and she did not let go, and for the first time in 600 years she was not alone at the door. You promised McGonagall, Wednesday said. She was on her knees beside him, her hands over his where they pressed the stone, not pulling him off, just holding, because pulling him off meant the flood. Her flat voice had a crack straight through it. You said you'd go in the middle. You said you would not be the one who goes into the dark so the others don't have to. And then you put your hands on the door. It's a stopgap, Harry said. His palms were already going cold, the seal reaching up into him the way it had reached into Morwenna, patient, beginning the long work of binding a living will. Wednesday, listen, I'm not staying. I'm holding so the castle doesn't drown while we work out the real answer, and there's a real answer. I can feel the shape of it now that I'm touching the seal. He turned his head to look at her, at both of them, the fire and the frost, kneeling in the cold with their hands over his. Hermione's counter. Cold to break the false want, warmth to give the true one. We did it in the hall with 300 people, but Morwenna's want is 600 years deep, and it can't be broken by 3 of us in one true sentence, even a good one. It needs to be witnessed. She needs the coming up she was promised, and a coming up isn't 3 strangers in the dark, it's the whole castle, it's every person she was supposed to be called up to, standing where she can see them, wanting her free, giving her the one near true thing she's owed and never had, which is to be seen, to be thanked, to be let go by the people she held the door for. The whole castle, Fleur said slowly. Down here or her up there? Up there, said Harry. You can't bring the castle down. But you can bring her up for one moment if enough people up there are wanting her free instead of wanting things she can drown in. The counter at the scale of the whole school aimed at one woman all at once. It would take every person in Hogwarts choosing in the same minute to want a stranger's freedom more than their own hunger. His hands pressed the cold door. It's the hardest thing in the world to arrange on purpose. Hermione said so. But it's the only thing that frees her without drowning anyone, and it's the only thing that gets me off this door, so somebody had better go up and arrange it, and it can't be me, because I'm the one holding the lid on the end of the world. The 2 women looked at each other over him, the fire and the frost, and did not waste a second on despair, because they were not that kind of women. I'll go up, Fleur said. I can move the castle. It is the one thing I have always been able to do, make people want what I want, and for once it will not be vanity, it will be the best use I have ever made of it. I will bring 3 schools to their feet wanting one dead woman free if I have to set myself on fire in the great hall to do it. She was already rising, and you, she looked at Wednesday, and it was not a question and not a command, it was the thing between soldiers. You stay with him, in the dark, it is your weather. Keep him talking, keep him himself, keep the seal from taking him the way it took her, and do not, whatever it shows you, whatever it offers, let go of his hands. I don't let go, said Wednesday. It's the only rule. Fleur looked at the 2 of them once more, Harry bound to the door and the girl who would not leave him, and then she turned and ran for the stair, up, alone, into a dark that would spend every step trying to take her, carrying the whole castle's only chance on the strength of a proud woman's certainty that she could make 300 people want the right thing at the right minute. And Harry knelt at the bottom of the world with his hands on the door of the flood and Wednesday's hands over his and Morwen Yvain weeping quietly beside him at the memory of a man who had arrived. And the cold began slowly to climb his arms, and above them the long stair rose 4 impossible floors to a castle that did not yet know it was about to be asked to save a stranger with nothing but the shape of what it wanted, and the deep, patient and vast and 600 years hungry. Settled in to take whichever of them it could reach first. Chapter 5 and Chapter 6. Darkest below, Fleur went up the stairs. She did everything on fire. She did not pace herself. There was no version of the climb where pacing herself mattered, because Harry's hands were on the door and every minute was a minute the seal spent climbing into him. And so she burned, a woman-shaped column of blue flame going up the throat of the deep 2 steps at a time, and the deep came for her the whole way. It came as it had come down, with the dead, her grandmother on the 3rd landing, real and warm and disappointed, saying, "Fleur, you were always running, sit with me." A boy she had loved in the war, 15 forever, holding out both hands, and then, worse, because the deep learned fast, it came as the living. It came as Gabrielle, her sister, 9 years old again and drowning, water pouring off her, reaching, and every instinct in Fleur's body screamed to stop and gather her up, and Fleur ran through her own sister's outstretched arms, sobbing, saying her name aloud, the real one. Wherever she is dry and safe, and this is not her, and did not stop, because stopping was the whole trap. And she had watched a man hold a door for 600 years, and she was not going to be undone by a puddle wearing her sister's face. Halfway up, the deep tried something new. It stopped showing her people she had lost. It showed her the thing she wanted most and had never said aloud to anyone, not to Harry, not to Wednesday, not to herself in the dark. It showed her the 3 of them after in the light in a house by the sea, the impossible thing, the greedy thing, all of them. Harry and the funeral girl and her, no one made to choose, no one made to lose, a life too strange and too full for the ordinary world to allow, and the caption it wrote under it in the cold was, "You cannot have this. Choose one and lose the other and be a little lonely forever like everyone else, or reach for all of it and be called greedy and mad and wrong. You cannot have the whole thing." No one gets the whole thing. Fleur stopped on the stair for 1 second because it was the truest thing the deep had said, because it was the thing she actually wanted and had been ashamed of wanting. Then she started climbing again, faster. "Watch me," she said, to the cold, to the dark, to the 600-year-old thing that had been so sure loneliness was the only honest ending. "Watch me have the whole thing. Watch me refuse to be a little lonely forever because it is tidy. I am Fleur Delacour, and I have never once in my life wanted the reasonable amount of anything." And she went up out of the deep and into the reconstruction and out into the castle with her sister's drowned face still burning in her eyes and her own greedy impossible want lit in her chest like a forge, and she used it, all of it, every scrap of shame she had just refused, as fuel. The reconstruction level was chaos. The shattering of the western windows had emptied the great hall hours ago, and the castle had not settled since. It had that thin electric wrongness of a place where everyone can feel that something is happening below, and no one has been told what. Prefects herded. Portraits shrieked news up their own frames. And in the middle of it, on the grand stair, McGonagall stood with her wand lit and Hermione at her side, and Ron behind her holding a defensive line against nothing, all 3 of them turning as Fleur came up out of the deep alone, singed and streaming and terrible. "Where are they?" McGonagall said, and it was not really a question, it was a woman bracing to hear the answer. "Alive, at the root. Harry has his hands on a door that holds back the end of the world, and the girl is with him keeping him himself, and they will both die down there, slowly, unless this castle does the single most difficult thing a castle has ever been asked to do." Fleur did not stop moving. She swept past them up the stair toward the doors of the great hall, and they fell in behind her because there was nothing else to do with a woman on fire but follow her. Ring the bell, every bell. Wake all of them, the 3 schools, every child and every ghost and every painting, and put them in that hall now, because in 1 hour at most I have to make 1,000 frightened, homesick, hungry people all want the same thing at the same minute, and it is not a thing any of them have ever met, and if I fail, Harry Potter spends 600 years as the new lock on the deep, and I will not have that. I will burn this castle to the waterline before I have that. "What thing?" Hermione said, already running to keep up, already reaching for the shape of it. "What do we need them to want? Tell me the exact thing and I'll help you build the words." "A stranger's freedom," Fleur said. "A dead woman none of them have ever heard of, who held a door for 6 centuries so their grandparents could sleep, and was never once thanked and is owed a coming up. I have to make 1,000 people who want their beds and their mothers and their small, safe lives want, instead, for 1 exhausted minute, the release of a woman they never knew." She reached the doors and threw them open on the wrecked and empty hall, the shattered windows, the cold coming in off the lock, and she stood in the doorway and looked at the ruin of the place where the thing had nearly taken everyone, and her jaw set hard. It is the opposite of everything the monster feeds on. It is wanting something you cannot keep, for someone who cannot pay you back. It is the least selfish want there is, and a castle full of exhausted teenagers is going to have to find it all at once or we lose him. She turned. So, headmistress, ring the bell. I have a speech to write, and I have never in my life had less time and more reason to be magnificent. McGonagall looked at her for one long moment, at the singed and streaming and utterly certain young woman standing in the door of the ruined hall, and then she did the thing she did, which was to become, instantly, the most useful person in any crisis. Miss Granger, the words with her now. Weasley, find Miss Lovegood and the Rousseau child and every person that thing has touched and failed to keep. They will want this most, and they will teach the others how. I will ring the bell. She was already moving, tartan snapping. You will have your 1,000 people, Miss Delacour, in 1 hour in this hall, awake and terrified and listening. What you do with them is between you and whatever it is you are. She paused at the foot of the stair and looked back, and her severe old face held something Fleur had not earned from her before. He chose well, McGonagall said. In you, in her, in having the sense to be loved by people who come up out of the deep on fire rather than leaving him down there. Whatever the three of you are to each other, and I have decided it, is none of my business. He chose well. Now go and be worth it. And the bell began to ring, every bell in the castle, the great bronze voice of Hogwarts waking 1,000 sleepers into the longest hour of their lives, and Fleur Delacour, greedy and impossible and on fire, sat down in the wreckage with Hermione Granger and began to write the most important thing either of them had ever written, while 4 floors below her the one she wanted knelt in the cold with his hands on the end of the world. 4 floors down, the cold had reached Harry's shoulders. It came up through his palms where they pressed the door, slow and patient, the seal doing to him what it had done to Morwenna, binding a living will 1 inch at a time, and it did not hurt, which was the frightening part. It felt like rest. It felt like being allowed, finally, to stop, and every inch it climbed made the next inch more reasonable, and he understood now from the inside exactly how a brave young warder had gone still against this stone 600 years ago and never come up. Talk to me, he said. His voice had gone slow. Wednesday, I can feel it getting sensible. Talk to me before it convinces me it's sensible. Wednesday knelt beside him in the dark with both her hands over his on the cold door, and she talked. She did not talk the way other people would have talked. She did not tell him to hold on or that help was coming or any of the warm, useless things. She told him true things, ugly and precise in hers, because true things were the rope she had, and she knew it. She told him about the time she had drowned her brother in a lake and had not been sorry, and about the exact shade of green a body goes on the 3rd day, and about the way her mother had looked at her father across a dinner table for 30 years, which was the only evidence Wednesday had ever collected that love might be real and not merely a chemical error. She told him the plot of every book she had read that year and the flaws in each one. She told him he read with his mouth moving and that she had decided it was the reason she trusted him, and she had told him that before, and she told him again, because repetition down here was a way of saying you are still the same person, I still know you, the seal has not made you a stranger yet. You're still you, she said, because you just tried to be gallant about the cold reaching your shoulders instead of telling me it hurts. It hurts, say it hurts. The version of you the seal wants doesn't feel anything, so feel something, out loud, for me. It hurts, Harry said. It doesn't hurt like pain, it hurts like giving up. That's worse. Wednesday, that's so much worse. It's the most comfortable thing I've ever felt, and it's eating me, and I can't tell where the tiredness ends and the seal starts. Good, she said. That's the truest thing you've said all night. Hold on to how much you hate it. Her cold hands gripped his colder ones. You are not going into this stone, do you hear me? I have decided, and I do not lose. Fleur is up there right now setting a castle on fire with her mouth, and she's going to give this woman her coming up, and you are going to take your hands off this door and walk up the stair between us, and in the spring you are going to have to actually deal with the fact that 2 impossible women are in love with you, which will be far more difficult than dying, and I am looking forward to watching you fail at it. Above the door, Morwenna Vane watched the girl talk him back from the stone, and something in her ancient worn face moved that had not moved in 600 years. He's going the way I went, she said in her rusted voice. 1 inch at a time, reasonable and reasonable and reasonable. Her pale eyes found Wednesday. You cannot talk him out of it forever. I talked myself out of it for 40 years. Then Eden died on the stair, and after that there was no more talking, only holding, and the holding is what you become. She looked at their 4 hands on the door, hers and his, and at the girl's hands over his, and grief moved in her like weather. Let me tell you the thing no one ever told me, because I have had 600 years to learn it and no one to say it to. The seal does not take the brave. It takes the ones who think they deserve to be taken. It took me because underneath the duty, underneath the promise, I believed a little that I was the kind of person who should hold doors alone in the dark forever, that it was fitting, that it was what I was for. That belief is the handle it grips, not the courage, the shame under the courage. She looked at Harry, cold to the shoulders, going still. You have it too, I can feel it in the stone. You believe underneath that you are the one who should be sacrificed so the others live, that it is what you are for. That is the handle, that is what it is climbing. Harry, 4 floors down, going numb, heard the oldest, truest, ugliest thing in him named aloud by a woman made of the same stone that was eating him, and he did not deny it because Rule 3, because Wednesday's hands were over his and she would know if he lied. Yeah, he said, I know, I've always known, it's why I ask for the cellars, it's why I walk into the middle of things. Some part of me has been trying to spend myself since I was 17, because I never really believed I was supposed to survive the war, and everyone who did survive it looks at me like I'm a miracle, and miracles are supposed to be used up. His voice was very slow now, very calm, the calm of the cold. So yeah, the seal's not lying to me either. It found the truest thing and made it a door, same as always. I do think I'm the one who should hold it. I do think that's what I'm for. Then be wrong about it, Wednesday said, fierce and flat and cold, gripping his hands. You're wrong about most interesting things, it's one of your best qualities. Be wrong about this one too. You are not for holding doors, you are not for being used up. You are the open question, Harry, and an open question that closes itself in a wall is not noble. It is a waste, it is the single most wasteful thing I can imagine, and I have imagined a great deal. She leaned her forehead down until it touched the back of his cold hands where they pressed the door, an intimacy so unlike her that it stopped the breath in Morwenna's ancient throat. I will make you a promise, and I do not make them, so weigh it. If you come up out of this, I will spend the rest of my life proving to you that you were supposed to survive, every day, in the most morbid and inconvenient ways available to me. I will make it my life's work to be evidence that you were meant to live, because I want you to, because I am selfish, because you are mine or hers, and either way you are ours and not the door's. That is the near true thing I am offering you right now in the cold, not rest, a witness, someone who will spend a lifetime insisting you were meant to be here. Take it, take mine instead of the door's. The cold stopped climbing. It stopped at his collarbone and it hung there because for the first time since he had put his hands on the stone, Harry Potter wanted something more than he wanted to be used up, something near and true and available, a girl with cold hands and a lifetime of morbid insistence. A woman on fire 4 floors up refusing to let him become a lock, and the wanting of that, the small near-real wanting of a life instead of a sacrifice, met the seal's patient climb and stopped it cold. 1 inch below his throat, that's it, Harry breathed. That's the counter on me. You just did it on me the way we did it in the hall. You broke the false want. You gave me a near true one. His hands were still on the door, still bound, but the climbing had stopped, and that was everything. Wednesday, it works. It actually works. Now we just have to do it to her. His eyes went up to Morwenna, weeping above the door at the scale of a whole castle, and get me off this stone and not drown the world. Small stuff, we're basically done. Wednesday lifted her forehead from his hands and looked at him, cold and pale and steady in the dark at the bottom of the world, and she did the thing she almost never did, which was to let him see, for one unguarded second, exactly how frightened she had been. Don't make jokes at the door, she said. It's my job to make jokes at the door. You keep the vigil and I'll be terrible. That's the arrangement. But she did not let go of his hands, and she did not stop being his witness, and 4 floors up the bell rang, and a castle woke into the longest hour of its life. For a while in the cold, the 3 of them held. Harry's hands stayed on the door because they had to, and the seal stayed 1 inch below his throat because Wednesday's witness held it there, and Morwenna hung above them, weeping quietly, and for the first time she was not weeping for herself. She watched the girl hold him to the light, and something in the watching healed a place in her that 600 years of dark had worn raw. I have to tell you how it works, she said at last, the coming up. Before it comes, so you are ready, because when it comes there will be no time to explain, and every second will want to be spent on fear. Her pale eyes had cleared, and what looked out of them now was only the warder, 22 and grave and precise, the woman the founders had trusted to hold the end of the world. A coming up is not a spell you cast on me. It is a thing you do with me, and I have to be willing and I have to be seen. Those are the 2 hinges of it, and they are the 2 things I was denied. No one ever asked whether I was willing to stay. No one ever saw me down here. So the release is only this, enough people up there wanting me free so that I can hear it and believe it, and me down here choosing to go, willing into their wanting. Their want is the hand reaching down, my willing is the hand reaching up, and they have to meet. She looked at Harry. You are the place they meet. You are already bound to the seal, which means you are already partly in the stone with me, and that is terrible, and it is also the only reason this can work. When the call comes, it will come down through you, because you are the bridge, the 1 foot in the light and 1 in the dark. You will feel 1,000 strangers wanting me free, pouring through you, and it will be the most that anyone has ever felt, and you will want to hold on to it, and you must not. You must let it pass through you and into me and keep nothing for yourself, and that is the hardest thing because it will feel like the only warmth you have ever known and you will have to give all of it away. I can do that, Harry said. Giving warmth away is the one thing I'm actually good at. Ask anyone I've ever gotten killed. Don't, Wednesday said without heat. That's the seal talking. The seal wants you to think your warmth is only good for spending. Your warmth is good for keeping too. You're allowed to keep some, remember that when it comes. Morwenna looked between the 2 of them, the one who thought he was only good spent and the girl who would not let him believe it, and a thing that was almost peace settled over her ruined face. There is one more thing, and it is the danger, and you must both know it. Her voice dropped. I am not the only thing down here. I never was. There is me, the woman, and there is the thing behind the door, the hunger, the flood, 600 years of the wanting of the dead, and it has worn me like a coat for so long that even I forget some days that it is not me. When the call comes, when I feel myself about to be freed, it will understand that it is losing its home, and it will not go quietly, it will try to keep its host. It will reach for the strongest vessel it can find and pour itself into a new lock before the old one can walk away. Her pale eyes rested on Harry, and there was grief in them and warning. You are the strongest vessel it has ever been offered. A man who died and came back with the door left open. When it senses release, it will come for you. It will try to make you the next me. And the call from above will be trying to lift me out at the same moment the flood is trying to pour into you, and the two of you will be at opposite ends of the same thread, and someone will have to choose in that moment who rises and who is filled. She closed her eyes. I have had 600 years to decide what I will choose if it ever came to it, and I have decided, and I will not tell you what because you would argue, and there is no time in the world for arguing with a boy who thinks he is only good spent. Just know that when the moment comes, and it will come, you must do exactly as I say at once without weighing it, because I will have already weighed it for 6 centuries, and my arithmetic is older than yours. That's the second time someone told me tonight not to argue about who gets sacrificed, Harry said quietly. You and Wednesday, from opposite directions. Because we both love you, Morwenna said simply. In the ways we are able, the old dead woman and the cold live girl and people who love you are going to spend the rest of your life trying to stop you from spending yourself, and you are going to have to let some of them win. Start tonight, let one of us win tonight. She turned her face up toward the stone, toward the castle, toward the first far tremor of a bell beginning to ring. There, do you hear it? They are waking. She is doing it. The one on fire. She's going to give me my coming up. Her worn face lifted, luminous. 600 years and someone is ringing a bell for me. Hold on, both of you. Hold on to each other and hold on to the door, and whatever comes, remember that the last thing I felt at the very end was a bell and a girl's hand and 2 children who came down my stair and refused to die on it. That is more than I ever dared to want. That is enough. Whatever happens, that is already enough. And above them the bell rang out, and the longest hour of the castle's life began, and at the bottom of the world 3 people held on in the cold and waited for 1,000 strangers to come. The bell brought 1,000 people into the great hall in the dead middle of the night, and they came frightened in night-clothes and half-laced robes, 3 schools and every ghost in the paintings crowding their frames, and they filled the wrecked hall to its shattered windows, and they wanted every one of them to be told it was all right and sent back to bed. It was the single worst audience for what Fleur had to do, and it was the only audience there was. She stood on the staff table so they could all see her, and she did not look magnificent. That was the choice she made, standing up there in the cold with the lock wind coming through the broken glass. She had washed the soot from her face, but she had not fixed her hair or mended her singed robes, and she let them see her wrecked, because she had learned, teaching 30 frightened children to duel, that you cannot lead people to a hard place from behind a beautiful mask. So she stood in front of 1,000 people undone, and she began, and she did not use the allure. She had promised Harry that in a corridor weeks ago, and she kept the promise now when it would have been easiest to break. She used only her voice and the truth. My name is Fleur Delacour, she said. Most of you are afraid of me, or were. Tonight I am going to ask you for the hardest thing anyone has ever asked you for, and I am going to tell you the truth about it first, because you deserve that, and because the thing I am asking for does not work if there is a lie under it. The hall was silent, even the ghosts. There is a woman under this castle, Fleur said. Her name was Morwenna Vane. 600 years ago she was 22 years old, and she was in love, and she was going to have a life, and the founders of your school came to her and asked her to give it up. To bind her living will into a seal in the deep, to hold shut a door behind which all the hunger of the dead was rising, so that everyone above her could sleep safe, and she said yes. She was 22, and she said yes, and she went down into the dark on a promise. They promised her they would call her up when it was safe. That when a better way was found, she would be released and given back her life and given back her love. Fleur's voice did not shake, and the not shaking was its own kind of force. The better way was never found, because finding it was hard and forgetting her was easy. Everyone who made the promise died, and Morwenna Vane held the door. She has been holding it for 600 years, alone in the cold, waiting to be called up, and no one ever came. She held it while your grandparents were born. She held it while the war came and went. She's holding it right now, tonight, under your feet, so that you can stand in this hall and be afraid of me instead of drowning in the longing of every dead soul that ever wanted and was denied. She has kept every one of you alive, and none of you ever knew her name, and she was never once thanked. Somewhere in the crowd, someone had begun to weep. Fleur let it spread. The thing you have all been feeling these last weeks, the wanting, the fighting over books you don't care about, the reaching for things you don't even like, that is her, starving at the end of her strength, and it is not her fault, it is ours. It is 600 years of ours. And tonight 2 people I love went down to keep the promise no one kept, and one of them, a young man some of you have spent your whole lives calling a hero, is on his knees at the bottom of the world right now with his hands on that door, holding it shut in her place because she can no longer hold it alone, and the door is eating him, 1 inch at a time, the way it ate her. He will die down there, he will become the next Locke, unless... She stopped. She looked out at 1,000 frightened faces. Unless you help me give Morwenna Vane the one thing she was promised and never received, her coming up, to be called at last out of the dark, to be seen, to be thanked, to be released by the people she held the door for. How? Someone called from the crowd, ragged. How do we do that? We're just children, we're just tired. You want it, Fleur said. That is all, that is the whole of it, and it is the hardest thing in the world because I am not asking you to want something you can have. I am asking you to want freedom for a stranger who can never repay you, release for a woman you will never meet, rest for someone whose only gift to you was a safety you never noticed. It is the least selfish want there is. It is the exact opposite of everything that thing has been feeding on. And if enough of us want it all at once in this hall in 1 minute with our whole hearts, it will reach down through 600 years of stone and it will find her, and it will be, for the first time since she was 22, someone calling her name and meaning come up, we came, you can rest now. Fleur's eyes were bright and her voice rang off the broken glass. You have all wanted things you couldn't have, every one of you. Tonight I am asking you to do it on purpose together for someone who needs it more than you have ever needed anything. Want her free, that is the spell. Want a stranger free with everything you have, and do not stop until she is. And Hermione, at the foot of the table, lifted her wand and cast the working she had built in 1 hour, a vast gentle web of a spell that did not compel a single want but only gathered the ones freely given, a lens to focus 1,000 hearts down through the stone to a single point in the deep. And she looked up at Fleur and nodded. It's ready, it will carry whatever they give it. And now it was up to 1,000 exhausted, frightened children to give it something worth carrying. For a terrible moment, nothing happened. 1,000 people stood in a cold hall and tried to want a stranger free, and it was too abstract, too hard, too far, and Fleur felt it not landing, felt the want scatter and thin, and the door 4 floors down was eating a man she loved, and it was not going to be enough. Cleverness and courage and a good speech were not going to be enough. Then Colette Rousseau, 9 years old, who had been taken and given back, who knew better than anyone in that hall what it was to be held under by a longing you could not escape, let go of her cousin's hand and climbed up onto a bench so the whole hall could see her, small and pale in her nightgown, and she said in French, in a child's clear carrying voice, the thing that turned it. She was alone, Colette said, in the dark, for a very long time, and nobody came. She looked out at the 1,000 faces, at the children from 3 schools, at everyone who had ever been small and away from home and frightened. I was alone in the dark for 1 day, and it was the worst thing that ever happened to me, and someone came. Fleur came. The cold girl's little hand came and held mine. Someone came for me. Her chin trembled and held. 600 years, and nobody came for her. I want somebody to come for her. I want it more than I want to go home, please. Let us be the somebody, let us come for her. And a 9-year-old's want for a stranger's rescue went into Hermione's waiting lens, pure and total and true. The realest thing in the hall, and it caught, the way a single true flame catches dry wood. And the child next to Colette wanted it too, and then the bench, and then the row, and then like a tide turning, like a field of dead flowers turning all at once toward a sun that had finally come back on. 1,000 people in a cold and broken hall stopped being afraid and started together. With everything they had to want a woman they had never met to be free. The lens blazed, the want poured down through the stone, and 4 floors below in the seal heart, Morwenna Vane lifted her head from her weeping and went utterly still because she had heard, through 600 years of dark, a sound she had stopped believing in. Someone was calling her name, a great many someones calling her up. The call came down through the stone like light through deep water, and it reached the seal heart, and it was the most beautiful and terrible thing Harry had ever felt. 1,000 strangers wanting a dead woman free, pouring down through 600 years of dark to the exact point where she knelt bound above the door. Morwenna Vane raised her worn gray face to it. The flat pale went out of her eyes and stayed out, drowned in the warmth of the call, and she looked up through the stone toward a castle full of children calling her name and meaning come up, we came, and her whole ancient ruined face opened like a door in spring. They came, she whispered. They came for me after all this time. Someone came. Her hands trembled on the door. I can go up. I can finally go up. And the hunger behind the door, which was not Morwenna, which had only ever worn her, understood in that instant that it was about to lose its host and its meal and its 600-year home all at once, and it did the thing a cornered appetite does. It stopped being subtle. It stopped being patient. It threw everything it had at the lid. The door did not crack this time. It heaved all at once with the whole massed weight of 6 centuries of hoarded longing behind it, and Morwenna's failing hands could not have held it, and Harry's could not have held it, and the 2 of them together could not have held it, and the black stone split from edge to edge, and the flood came up. It was not water. Harry had known it would not be water, and he was not ready for what it was, because what it was every want anyone had ever taken to their grave. It poured up out of the broken door in a cold gray tide, and it was the longing of the drowned and the jilted and the starved and the abandoned. 600 years of it, pooled and pressurized and rising, and it wanted with a voice like the sea, and it broke over the three of them in the seal heart, and Harry felt it try to fill him. Hold on to her, Wednesday said, and her voice cut through the roar because she made it, flat and hard and absolute. She had both hands locked on Morwenna now, on the woman, on the part that was still a person, and she was holding the warder to the call, to the light coming down, keeping her turned upward while the flood tried to drag her back into itself. Harry, don't fight the flood, you can't, it's an ocean, let it come up, just keep her connected to the call, that's the only thing that matters, keep her turned toward the light. It wants a host, Harry shouted over the roar. The flood was pouring up around him, and it had found him, found the survivor, found the one who had died and come back with the door left open behind him, and it was climbing into him the way the seal had, but faster, hungrier, because he was the richest vessel it had ever been offered. Wednesday, it's leaving her. It doesn't need her anymore, she's used up, it's coming into me, it wants me to be the new Locke, the new wanting, it's going to. His voice changed, went cold, went wrong, and he heard it happen and could not stop it. 600 years of pure appetite pouring into the one person in the castle strong enough to hold it. It's going to make me the door, and for a moment it did. For a moment Harry Potter knelt at the bottom of the world, and the hunger poured into him and filled him and looked out through his eyes, and it was so much, it was everything, every want that had ever been denied, and some part of him that had spent his whole life believing he was meant to be used up opened its arms to it, welcomed it, thought, yes, this is what I am for, I will hold the door, I will take it all so no one else has to. And the cold closed over the last of him, and the thing that had been Harry Potter turned its head and looked at Wednesday Addams with eyes gone entirely, finally, the flat pale of a bird's. There he is, said the hunger in Harry's voice, cold and vast in content. The last Locke, the best one, he wanted this, ask him. He has always wanted this, I did not even have to lie. Wednesday Addams looked at the thing wearing the face she had crossed a continent for, the one open question she had ever met, closing over into the flat pale of the door, and she did not scream, and she did not let go of Morwenna, and she did the only thing left, which was to be a witness out loud at the end of the world. That's not him, she said, flat, certain, absolute. I know exactly what he is, and that's not it. Harry Potter would never once tell me it was easy. Whatever promises me it's easy is you. She held the warder to the light with one hand, and she reached the other into the flood, toward the cold thing wearing his face, palm open, not grasping, and she said the thing she had promised him in the dark, the near true thing, the counter, aimed now at the exact center of him. You are not for holding doors, you are not for being used up. I told you I would spend my life proving you were meant to survive, and I meant it, and you do not get to make a liar of me on the first night. Come back, not because it's noble to, because I am asking and I never ask, and you know what it costs me. Come back and be the open question. Come back and be difficult and alive and mine. Refuse the door, Harry, for once refuse the door. Above them, Fleur's voice came down through the stone with the call, wordless now, only warmth, only 1,000 strangers and one woman on fire wanting them both free, Morwenna and Harry, the warder and the survivor, wanting them up and out and living. And Morwenna Vane turned to the light, filled with the call, hearing a girl beg a boy back from the exact stone that had taken her own life, did the last thing she had strength for. She let go of the door entirely, both hands, and she did not rise toward her freedom, not yet. She turned instead and put her freed hands on the flood, on her own 600-year hunger, and she spoke to it as no one ever had, as the only person who had ever truly owned it. No, she told her own hunger gently, the way you speak to a thing you have carried too long. Not him, you do not get him. You have had 600 years of me, and you do not get one more soul. We are done. You and I are going up into the light together, and we are going to stop, both of us, because I am tired, and because someone finally came, and because I will not spend my freedom the way they spent my life, by feeding you another volunteer. She gathered the flood, all of it, the whole gray tide of hoarded longing, back into herself, into the woman, as she had held it at the door, but inward now, taking it home. Come here, come back into me. We will carry it up together, and we will set it down in the light where it can finally rest, because that is all it ever wanted under all the taking. To rest, I know I have wanted it too. Come here. The flood turned. It turned away from Harry, drawn back by the one voice in the universe it had to obey, its own, and it poured back out of him and into her, all of it, 600 years, and Harry Potter collapsed against the broken lip of the well, emptied, gasping, warm himself, his eyes his own green again. Wednesday's hand fisted in his collar, hauling him back from the edge. And above them Morwenna Vane swelled with the whole of her ancient hunger gathered home into her at last. A woman made of 6 centuries of want, holding all of it, ready to carry it up, but the door was open. The flood was in her, not shut behind stone, and she was the only thing holding it now, one exhausted woman with no seal left, and the call from above was fading because 1,000 exhausted children could not want forever, and Harry was too spent to stand, and Wednesday could not hold a flood, and Fleur was 4 floors up. and Morwenna Vane looked down at the two of them with the whole end of the world gathered into her arms and the light from above going thin, and she smiled. And it was the saddest and most peaceful thing either of them had ever seen. "Tell them thank you," she said, "for coming. It was all I ever wanted. Now get up the stair, both of you, fast, while I still hold it, because I can carry this up into the light and set it down and rest, but I can only do it once, and I can only do it if you are not in the way, and I would so like the last thing I do to be the thing they never let me do, to choose it. To go up willing one more time, and this time to actually arrive." And she began to rise slowly, terribly, a woman made of 600 years of hunger lifting toward a light that was almost gone, and Wednesday hauled Harry to his feet, and the seal heart began to come apart around them, and 4 floors up in a cold and broken hall, 1,000 exhausted children felt the thing they had been wanting begin at last to happen, and did not know if they had been in time. Chapter 6 and Chapter 7. On his terms, Morwenna Vane rose toward the light with 600 years of hunger gathered into her arms, and the light was failing. Harry felt it through the last thread of the seal still bound to him, felt the call from above thinning as 1,000 exhausted children reached the end of what tired hearts can give, and he understood with the seal's own cold clarity the exact shape of the disaster. She was rising too slowly. The flood she carried was too heavy. The call would gut her out before she reached the top, and she would fall back into the deep with the whole of it, and there would be no second bell, because you cannot ask a castle to break its own heart twice in one night. "It's not enough," he said. "Wednesday, the call's dying. She's not going to make it. They're spent up there." "Then give her yours," Wednesday said. She had not let go of his collar, and she did not let go now. "You're the bridge," she said, "so everything they send comes through you. So stop being a wall in the current and be a lens. Take everything you have, everything, and send it up the thread with theirs. Give her your want, Harry. You've spent your whole life wanting people you love to live and giving it away for free. Do it now. Do it on purpose for her." And Harry Potter, kneeling at the bottom of the world with one hand still fused to a breaking door, did the one thing he had always known how to do better than anyone, which was to want someone he had just met to be free more than he wanted anything for himself. He took all of it, the whole of him, every scrap of warmth the seal had not yet taken, and he did not keep a single degree of it back, and he sent it up the thread into the fading call like a man throwing the last log on a fire that had to last one more minute. The light steadied, and then, because want is the only thing in the universe that grows when you give it away, the light brightened. Because Wednesday sent hers up behind his, cold and total and absolute, the want of a girl who did not want things being spent for a woman she had decided was owed a coming up. Because 4 floors above, Fleur felt the call falter and threw herself into it, all her fire, all her greed, all her impossible refusal to accept that anyone had to be a little lonely forever, and 1,000 tired children felt a woman on fire want with them and found, at the bottom of their exhaustion, one more minute of wanting after all. Because Colette and Ron and Luna and Hermione and McGonagall, who had rung the bell, and every ghost and every painting, poured the last of themselves down through the stone, and the thread between the light and the deep blazed white, and Morwenna Vane, 22 years old under 600 years of dark, rose the last of the way into it. And at the top, in the light, she was met. Harry saw it because he was the bridge, and the bridge sees both ends. He saw her break the surface of the light like a swimmer coming up out of black water at last, and he saw that the light was not only 1,000 strangers wanting her free. It was also, at the very top, the ones who had waited, the founders who had promised her, come at last to keep it, 6 centuries late and ashamed. And an old man who cut stone, who had died reaching and had, it turned out, been waiting all this time on the other side of the light for her to finally arrive, patient as she was patient, certain as she was certain, and he opened his arms, and she went into them still carrying the whole of the flood, and she set it down. She set it down in the light. 600 years of the hunger of the dead, the wanting of the drowned and the jilted and the starved, the covetous grief that had been so terrible in the dark, and in the light, held by the one person who had ever truly owned it, met by the one person who had ever come for her, it was not terrible at all. It was only tired. It had only ever wanted to be met and witnessed and allowed at long last to rest, and now it was, all of it, every lonely want 6 centuries deep, gathered up and carried into the light and set down and let go, and it dispersed the way frost disperses in the sun, not destroyed, not exploded, only finally released. The thread went slack. The last of the seal fell away from Harry's hand like ice off a thawing branch. He knelt at the bottom of the world with his hand free and his warmth gone and his whole body shaking, empty as a spent match, and he would have gone straight down onto the cold stone if Wednesday had not been holding him, and she held him, and above them the seal heart, 600 years of prison, filled slowly with an ordinary gray dawn light that had no business being 4 floors underground and came anyway, because the thing that had kept the dawn out was gone. She made it, Harry breathed. Wednesday. She made it up, she's free, he could not finish it. There were no words at the bottom of the world for a promise 600 years unpaid, finally at the very last minute kept. She's home, Wednesday finished for him, flat and quiet and for once not cold at all. Somebody came and she went up willing, and this time she arrived. She looked up at the impossible dawn filling the ruined seal heart, and thing crept up onto her shoulder and reached one finger toward the light, and the girl who collected corpses and did not believe in much watched an old grief go free and said very softly, "That's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Don't tell anyone I said so, I have a reputation." She looked down at Harry, empty and shaking in her arms. "Especially don't tell her, she'll be insufferable. She's going to come down that stair in about 90 seconds having felt it happen, and she's going to be magnificent about it, and I do not have the strength." There were footsteps on the stair, fast ones, coming down. "Too late," said Harry, and something in his chest that had been clenched since the night a black carriage rolled into the courtyard finally let go. Fleur came off the last step at a dead run and stopped, because the seal heart she had left as a prison full of dark was full instead of gray dawn light, and the door in the floor was gone, not broken, gone, healed over into ordinary stone, and the woman who had hung above it weeping for 6 centuries was nowhere, was up, was free, and in the middle of the transformed room knelt a girl in black holding a man who was the wrong color entirely. "He gave it all away," Wednesday said before Fleur could ask, flat and fast, the warmth to push the call over the top. "It worked, she's free, he's free, and now he's a spent match and he's going cold in a way that isn't the seal. It's just that he emptied himself and kept nothing, exactly like he always does, and if you have ever in your life wanted to be useful to this idiot, now is the hour." Fleur crossed the seal heart in 3 strides and dropped to her knees and got her arms around Harry from the other side. And she did the thing she was for, the thing she had done for a homesick child and a drowning sister and 30 frightened students. She gave him her fire, banked low and safe and endless, poured it into him through her arms and her hands, and the side of her face pressed to his cold hair, warmth with no burning in it, the exact warmth he had spent and kept none of. Given back now freely by a woman who had crossed a continent for the privilege. He came back 1 degree at a time, the way Colette had, the way the whole hall had, cold to warm, and it was the counter run backward, not to break a false want but to answer a true one, because Harry Potter wanted to live underneath everything. He had finally admitted it on the door, and he did not take it back now, and the wanting of it met the warmth they gave him and caught and held. "There he is," Fleur murmured when his color came up and his shaking eased and his eyes found hers, green and tired and present. "There's the greedy idiot who threw away every scrap of his own warmth for a stranger and did not keep enough to stand up. You are the worst person I have ever loved, and I have loved a great many difficult people, and you are the champion." She pressed her forehead to his, careless of the cold girl 6 inches away, because Rule 3, because there was nothing left to hide. "You are not allowed to do that again. Spend yourself to the last coin and keep nothing, not ever. There are 2 of us now whose entire purpose is apparently to keep you warm enough to be insufferable, and you will let us, or I will be very French about it." "I kept something," Harry said. His voice was a ruin, but it was his. "At the end, Wednesday told me I was allowed to keep some, so I kept the part that wanted to come back up and argue with the 2 of you about whose fault this all was." He managed from somewhere the ghost of a grin. "It's your fault, both of you, you showed up." "Yes," said Wednesday, "we did, and we'd do it again. That's the entire problem, and neither of us is sorry." She had not let go of his collar the whole time Fleur warmed him, and she did not let go now, and the 3 of them knelt together in the gray dawn of a room that had been a prison for 600 years. The fire and the frost and the one they had both refused to let the dark keep, and for a while none of them said anything, because some things are too large for talking and can only be survived by being held. It was Thing in the end that broke it, by climbing down from Wednesday's shoulder and scuttling to the center of the seal heart, to the healed stone where the door had been, and standing there on its fingers, pointing urgently up. "He's right," Wednesday said, translating with the ease of long practice. "We should go up. There's a castle full of children who spent the whole night wanting a stranger free, and they don't know yet whether it worked, and they are sitting in a cold hall being afraid, and somebody should go and tell them they saved a woman's soul. It's the sort of thing they should get to know before breakfast. It builds character." She rose and pulled Harry up with her, and Fleur took his other side, and the 2 women got him between them in the middle where they could reach him, exactly as McGonagall had ordered a lifetime ago at the top of the stair. "In the middle," Harry said, "between the fire and the frost. I did promise." "You did," said Fleur. "It is the one promise you have kept all night without arguing, and I intend to hold you to it for approximately the rest of your life." They climbed up out of the deep together, the 3 of them slowly, because Harry could not go fast and neither of them would go faster than he could, and the stair that had spent the whole descent trying to take them apart did nothing at all now, because there was nothing left in it to do the taking, only old cold stone and a long climb, and here and there on the landings, the faintest gray warmth of a dawn that had never reached this far down before and was reaching now. On the landing where Harry had seen Sirius, there was no one. On the landing where the dead had gathered from the wet, the walls were dry. The deep had gone quiet, and the quiet was not the held breath of a hunting thing. It was the quiet of a room after the funeral, when the grief has been carried out and set down and the living can finally open the windows. Near the top, where the shaped stone gave way to the founders' courses and the founders' courses gave way to the reconstruction, Harry stopped and made them stop and put his hand flat to the wall one last time, reading as he had the first night 11 weeks and a whole life ago. "It's just a wall now," he said. "The whole seal, it's just old stone, no holding grammar, no lid, no door. She took all of it with her when she went." He took his hand off the wall. 600 years this castle had a wound in its foundations and nobody knew, and tonight it closed because 3 schools full of tired kids wanted a stranger free and a warder finally got to go home. He looked at the 2 women holding him up in the gray light at the top of the deep. "I've spent my whole life being the reason things got broken, buildings, people. It's the story everyone tells about me and it's the one I believe at 3 in the morning. His voice was quiet and steady. "Tonight I was the reason something got mended. I'd like to remember that. I'd like the 2 of you to remind me next time it's 3 in the morning and I've forgotten." "I'll remind you," Wednesday said, morbidly at length with diagrams. "I'll remind you," Fleur said beautifully, "and you will believe me because I am very hard to disbelieve." She squeezed his arm. "Now come up into the light, Harry. There is a castle up there that needs to be told a story with a good ending, and for once in your life you are standing in one. Do not waste it being sad on the stairs." And they went up, the 3 of them, out of the dark into the dawn. They came up into the great hall as the sun cleared the mountains, and 1,000 people who had spent the night wanting a stranger free saw the 3 of them walk out of the reconstruction stair alive, and understood from their faces that it had worked, and the sound the hall made then was not a roar and not a cheer. It was the sound a great many people make when they have done a hard and selfless thing together and lived, a long ragged exhalation that turned into weeping and then into something like song. And it went on for a while, and none of the 3 of them tried to stop it, because it was theirs, all of theirs, 1,000 people's, and it was the opposite of everything the dark had fed on and it tasted, McGonagall said afterward, like the first clean water after a long fever. Colette Rousseau was the first to reach them. She came through the crowd at a run and threw herself at Fleur, and then astonishingly at Wednesday, who received the embrace of a 9-year-old with the stiff bewilderment of a woman handed a live grenade, and after a moment awkwardly patted the child's head with the exact 2 fingers thing had used to hold her hand in the dark. The girl's eyes were clear. Whatever had held her under, that far homesick hunger the dark had drowned her in, was gone with the rest of it, released into the light, and she was only a child again, tired and alive and asking in rapid French whether the sad lady in the walls had really truly gone home. "She really truly went home," Fleur told her. "Someone came for her. We all did, you most of all. You told the whole castle to be the somebody, and they were." She smoothed the girl's hair. "You saved her, Colette. A 9-year-old saved a soul 600 years old because she knew, better than anyone in this hall, exactly how much it matters when someone comes. Never forget you did that." McGonagall got them out of the crowd eventually, because she was the only force in Scotland capable of it, and she got them fed, and she got Harry a full day of the kind of sleep that only happens after the worst is over. And she asked once quietly whether the deep was truly closed, and Harry told her it was just a wall now, and she looked at him for a long moment and then did the thing she had done exactly 4 times in his life, which was to embrace him briefly and fiercely and tell him, in a voice that did not entirely hold, that his mother would have been beyond proud, and that she was saying it because someone had to, and she was the closest thing to family he had in the building, and she took the duty seriously. Then she released him and became McGonagall again, and told him he looked a fright and to go and be a fright somewhere she did not have to file paperwork about it. It was 2 evenings later, on the top of the tower where Fleur had kissed him a lifetime ago, that the 3 of them finally had the conversation none of them had been in any state to have. Harry had asked them both to come. That mattered, and all 3 of them knew it mattered, because for the whole length of the year the 2 women had come for him, and this was the first time he had done the summoning on his own terms in his own time on a tower under a clear cold sky with the whole saved castle glowing warm behind them. "So," he said, "the monster's dead, well, not dead, free, which turns out to be the only way to kill that kind of thing, which I have feelings about, but that's a different tower." Looked at the 2 of them, the fire and the frost, sitting on the parapet in the starlight, self-possessed and watchful and entirely themselves. Which means the thing we all agreed to put off until after is now. It's after, and I've had 2 days to think about it, and I'm going to say the whole thing plainly once because you both deserve plain, and I've been a coward about it since October. "Finally," said Wednesday, "I was going to have to poison someone just to move things along. Here's the plain thing." He did not deflect it, and both of them watched him not deflect it, which was its own kind of proof. "I'm not going to choose one of you to defeat the other. I want to be very clear that this isn't cowardice and it isn't indecision. It's a refusal. From the first morning this whole year there was a version of it where I was the prize and one of you won me and the other one lost, and the whole castle watched, and that version made me feel like a cup on a shelf, and I told you both that first day over a dead bird that I wouldn't be the war." He held their eyes, one and then the other. I meant it then, and I mean it more now. I am not a trophy. I don't have a winner. If either of you needs me to be a thing you want off the other, then you don't actually want me, you want to have beaten her, and I'm not going to be the ground you fight that out on. That's my first term, and it's not negotiable, and it's the one I'd end this whole thing over. The tower was quiet. Neither of them argued. He had expected argument. Go on, said Fleur. Her voice was careful. You said first term. That means there are more. I'm listening to all of them before I say anything, because I have learned this year that you are worth listening all the way through. The second thing, this was the hard one, and he made himself say it slowly because it was true and true things deserved room. I care about both of you, really, differently all the way down in ways that don't cancel out and never once competed inside me whatever they did outside me. He looked at Fleur. You see me and you refuse to flatter me, and you warm the cold parts of me that I'd otherwise just live with forever, and you came up out of the deep on fire and gave me back the warmth I'd thrown away, and there's a version of my life that's your fire in it, and it's a good version, and I want it. He looked at Wednesday. And you understand me better than people who have known me for years, and you told me the truth every single time, even when it cost you, and you knelt at the end of the world and promised to spend your life being evidence that I was meant to survive, and there's a version of my life that's your cold company in the dark places nobody else will follow, and it's a good version, and I want that too. He spread his hands. I've spent the whole year waiting to find out which one of these was the real one and which was the trick. Neither of them is the trick, that's the thing I couldn't say. They're both real, and I'm greedy, and I've had a hard life, and I've decided I'm done pretending I only feel the tidy amount. That, said Wednesday after a silence, is either the most honest thing anyone has ever said on this tower or the beginning of a catastrophe, and I genuinely cannot tell which, and I find that thrilling. It's both, said Harry. The good ones always are, Luna told me. He took a breath. So here's the last term, and then I'm done, and the two of you get to decide, because I've decided my part and the rest was never mine to decide alone. I'm not going to possess either of you, and I'm not going to be possessed by either of you, and the thing under this castle spent 600 years teaching me exactly what wanting to own turns into if you let it. It turns into the deep. It turns into a woman in a wall. Whatever the three of us are or aren't, it has to be the other kind of wanting. The kind you give away instead of grasp, the kind that starved the monster, freely chosen all the way down by three people who could walk away and don't. He looked between them. I know what I'm describing is strange. I know it's greedy and unreasonable, and the ordinary world doesn't have a tidy shape for it. But I've spent a year watching the two of you become something to each other that isn't rivals and isn't nothing, and I've stopped believing the ordinary shape is the only one, and I'm not going to insult any of us by pretending I want less than I want. He was quiet a moment. That's all of it. That's every card. Face up, your move. Both of you take whatever you need to take. For a long moment neither woman said anything. The stars burned in the black loch below. And then Fleur and Wednesday looked at each other over Harry's head, the way they had been looking at each other over his head since the first morning, except that everything underneath the look had changed, and it was Fleur who spoke first to Wednesday and not to him. I told you in the hospital wing, Fleur said, that if he chose you I would drink something expensive and be furious and then be your friend. And you said if he chose me you would come to the wedding in black and not poison anyone. Her mouth curved. Neither of us said anything about what we would do if the impossible idiot refused to choose at all and put it back on us, and asked whether two women who have become the only worthy rival either of them has ever had could want a thing without needing the other one to lose it. No, Wednesday agreed. We did not plan for that. It was a failure of imagination. I hate failures of imagination. She considered Fleur across the tower, grave and pale and entirely serious. I have respected you since the day you dried the walls instead of burning the dead. I have liked you revoltingly since the courtyard. And somewhere in the deep, holding on to him in the dark while you set a castle on fire to save us both, I stopped being able to imagine doing any of this without you, which is the closest thing to a declaration I am capable of making to another living person, and I want it on record that I made it on a tower soberly, and that it cost me enormously. Is on record, said Fleur, and something passed between the two of them that had no name in any of the three languages present, and did not need one. Harry looked from one to the other and did the wise thing, which was to say nothing at all, and let the two most formidable people he had ever met decide on their own terms in their own time what they wanted, now that no one had to lose. It was Wednesday who turned to him first, which surprised no one more than Fleur, who had money on herself. Here are my terms, Wednesday said, since you have decided we are in negotiation, which is the single most attractive thing you have ever done, and I resent how well it worked. She folded her hands. 1. I do not do sweet. If either of you ever expects me to be sweet, the arrangement is void and I go home and you never see me again except in your peripheral vision at funerals. 2. I reserve the right to compete with her savagely forever at everything that is not you. Dueling, warding. Chess, who can hold their hand in the cold longest. I intend to win most of them and lose some of them on purpose so she stays interested, and she will do the same to me, and it will be the great sport of both our lives, and you are not permitted to referee. She tilted her head. 3. You do not get to be a prize even now. You keep showing up as a person with opinions and a will and the extremely annoying habit of walking into the middle of things, and the day you go quiet and grateful and let us carry you is the day I know the seal finally got you after all, and I will be very put out. Those are my terms. They are non-negotiable, and I have never wanted anything more in my life, and if you tell anyone I said that last part, I will replace all your socks with something that was recently alive. Accepted, said Harry. All three, especially the socks clause, it shows commitment. My terms, said Fleur and rose, unfolding to her full height on the parapet with the starlight behind her, magnificent and unhurried and warm, are shorter because I am more efficient than she is, which is term 1. Wednesday inclined her head, conceding the point and filing it for revenge. Term 2, I will not be a secret. I have spent my whole life being looked at, and I refuse to spend the rest of it being hidden. Whatever this is, it is in the open, like a person, the way I told you in a corridor in October when I did not yet know how right I would turn out to be. If the ordinary world does not have a shape for three people who chose each other freely and refused to let anyone lose, then the ordinary world can widen or it can talk, and I have never once in my life been stopped by talk. She looked down at him, and the fire in her had gone gentle, which was more dangerous than the blaze. Term 3. You will let us keep you warm. You threw away all your warmth for a stranger and kept nothing and nearly died of it on a floor, and I have decided that the great project of my life, alongside defeating that impossible funeral girl at chess for the next 50 years, is making certain you never do that again. You will let yourself be kept warm. That is my term. It is the only one I will fight you on, and I will win, because I always win the ones that matter, and this one matters more than any I have ever fought. Harry looked up at the two of them, the fire standing and the frost seated, both of them fierce and self-possessed and entirely unwilling to be anyone's second, both of them having just told him in the only dialects they spoke that they had chosen this freely with their eyes open on a tower soberly, and that neither of them needed the other to lose in order to win. Accepted, he said, every term, and here's mine, the last one, and then we stop negotiating and start whatever this is. He stood so the three of them were on their feet together in the starlight. You two never stop being who you are, not for me, not for the arrangement, not for anything. She stays deadpan and lethal and morbid, and I never once ask her to smile more. She stays proud and on fire and impossible, and I never once ask her to take up less room. The day either of you shrinks to fit this is the day it's already broken. I didn't fall for two women and then ask them to become smaller. I fell for exactly the size you both are. Stay that size. That, said Fleur softly, is the correct answer, and you did not even have to be told it. And she crossed the last of the distance and kissed him in the open under the stars without hiding, and Wednesday watched them do it without a flicker of grief, because a want given freely does not feed anything hungry, and there was nothing hungry left on the tower, only three people who had chosen, and the choosing had made them free. What came after, the three of them kept to themselves, and the tower kept it too, and the stars and the healed castle glowing warm below, and it was no one's business but theirs, which was in the end the entire point. There was a ceremony a week later, though McGonagall refused to call it that, because she said the word ceremony made governors nervous and made teenagers roll their eyes, and she called it instead a setting rite. She held it at the mouth of the Reconstruction stair in the cold, because that was where it had happened, and she would not sanitize it by moving it somewhere with better light. The whole castle came, 3 schools, all of them, and the ghosts, and the paintings carried down in frames and propped against the walls, and it was the most crowded that low, cold passage had ever been in 600 years. And for once the cold there was only the ordinary cold of a deep place, nothing living in it, nothing hungry, nothing that watched. McGonagall did not make a speech because she despised speeches, and instead she read in her flat, clear, carrying voice the only words of Morwenna Vain-S that had survived the knife, the page Hermione had found folded into the spine of a mason's ledger, the warder's own hand. She read the whole of it. The seal is not a wall but a life, and the life is mine, freely given, and she read the last line twice, slowly, so that 1,000 people would hear it and not be able to unhear it. Let it be recorded that I went down willing, and that I am owed a coming up. For 600 years, McGonagall said, when she had finished, and she was not reading now, she was only speaking, this castle owed a debt it had forgotten it owed. A young woman gave her whole life to hold shut a door so that we could have ours, and we thanked her by cutting her name out of the books so we would not have to feel the size of what she'd done. That is the true history of this school, and it is not a proud one, and I will not have it forgotten again. She looked out at the assembled 1,000. So here is the setting right, you will all of you remember her. Morwenna Vain, last warder of the deep, who went down willing and waited 600 years and was at the very last, on a cold night this year, called up out of the dark by a castle full of children who wanted a stranger free more than they wanted their own beds. She was seen. She was thanked. She was released. That is a debt paid, late but paid, and you were the ones who paid it, all of you, and I have never in 41 years been prouder of a student body, and I include the year we won the House Cup by 400 points, which I did not think anything would ever surpass. A ripple of something went through the crowd, part laughter and part the other thing. Then Colette Rousseau, who had appointed herself to this, came forward with a flat stone in her hands, a paving stone the reconstruction crews had cut and Wednesday had graven over 3 nights with a patience that had surprised everyone including herself, and the two of them, the 9-year-old and the girl in black, knelt together at the mouth of the stair and set the stone into the floor, where a dead swift had once been laid out neat and cold, and on the stone was cut, in Wednesday's precise hand, not an epitaph, because Wednesday had refused to write an epitaph on the grounds that epitaphs were for the finished, and Morwenna had only just started, but a single line the warder's own completed at last. She was owed a coming up. Someone came. That's the whole of it, Wednesday told Harry quietly, standing back to look at the stone. That's all anyone is ever owed in the end, not to win, not to be kept, just for someone to come before it's too late and mean it. She was not looking at him when she said it, which was how he knew she meant it about more than the warder. 600 years I'll be angry about, but someone came. I've decided to let that be the part I keep. Fleur set a flame at the head of the new stone, a small blue one, banked so it would not go out, warded so it would burn there quietly for as long as the castle stood, warmth in the cold place for a woman who had gone 6 centuries without any, and she stood between Harry and Wednesday in the crowded passage and looked at the small, steady fire and the graven stone and the 1,000 people who had come down into the cold to remember a stranger. In France, she said, we have a saying that the dead are only truly gone when the last person who spoke their name falls silent. By that reckoning, she is more alive now than she has been in 600 years, because 1,000 children just learned her name, and they will tell it, and their children will, and the flame will burn, and she will not be silent again. She reached out and took Harry's hand on one side, and after a moment's consideration, and with the air of a woman handling something rare, Wednesday's on the other. That is a good ending for the warder. It is not the ending she was promised, but it is a good one, and it is real, and it is more than the ordinary world usually manages. I find I am satisfied with it. So am I, said Harry. I'm satisfied with 60% of it, said Wednesday, which for me is a rave review and which I will deny under oath, and she did not take her hand out of Fleur's, and the 3 of them stood in the cold passage at the mouth of the Mendied Deep, over a graven stone and a small blue flame, and behind them 1,000 people began quietly, without being asked, to say a dead woman's name aloud, passing it back through the crowd like a candle being lit from a candle, Morwenna, Morwenna Vane, until the whole low cold passage was full of the sound of her being remembered, which was the one thing, in 600 years, that no one had ever thought to give her. The trials of Accord finished out the year, because McGonagall refused on principle to let a 600-year-old grief monster ruin a perfectly good exchange program, and they were, everyone agreed, the finest interschool games in living memory, chiefly because of the 2 exhibition duelists who fought each other in the final of every single event with a ferocity that stopped the breath in the stands, and a mutual respect so total that the crowds learned, over the spring, to cheer for both of them at once, which was a thing no crowd in the history of dueling had ever done. They were not gentle with each other. That was the astonishing part to everyone watching. Fleur Delacour and Wednesday Addams competed at everything, all spring ferociously, and neither of them ever once let the other win out of tenderness, because tenderness that lets you win is contempt wearing a nicer coat, and both of them knew it, and both of them would rather have been beaten honestly than spared. Wednesday won the warding trials, Fleur won the aerial. They tied 3 separate times in dueling in front of screaming crowds, and after the 3rd tie they walked off the pitch side by side arguing about the ruling, and Colette Rousseau, who followed them everywhere now, told anyone who would listen that the Cold Lady and the Fire Lady were the best of enemies, which was, she insisted, better than friends, because friends were easy and this was hard, and they chose it every single day. Harry entered the dueling trials again under his own name in the general lists, not as anyone's champion, and he won some and lost some quietly from the inside, and the craftsman's applause got warm enough by the end that he stopped flinching from it. He kept the reconstruction detail too all spring, because the castle still needed mending and he still liked the corner nobody wanted, but he did not go down alone at night anymore, and it was not because of any rule. It was because the corner nobody wanted turned out to be a great deal warmer, with a woman on fire arguing with a woman made of frost 3 feet away, both of them pretending to help and mostly competing over who could reset a warding stone faster, while Thing kept score on its fingers and ran out of them. Ron summarized the whole arrangement once in the spring, watching the 3 of them cross the courtyard together, with Colette on Fleur's shoulders and Thing riding Wednesday's and Harry in the middle laughing at something one of them had said, and he summarized it the way Ron summarized everything, which was accurately and with feeling. That should not work, he said to Hermione. By every law of nature and common sense and my own personal comfort, that should not work. No, Hermione agreed, watching them, and she had her book, of course, and she was writing it down because someone had to. It shouldn't, and it does, and do you know why? Because he's Harry and impossible things happen to him. Because none of them is trying to keep the others, Hermione said. That's the whole of it. That's the thing the monster taught them, and it cost a 9-year-old in a courtyard of broken glass to learn. The second any one of them tries to own another, it curdles. They all know it. They watch what it becomes. So they don't. They just keep choosing out loud every day freely three people who could walk away and don't. She closed the book. It's the only kind of wanting that doesn't rot. Turns out you have to give it away to keep it. 600 years and one dead warder to learn a thing my gran could have told them, but there we are. People only ever learn it the expensive way. On the last night of the year, before the carriages came to take the delegations home, Harry went down to the reconstruction one more time, to the mouth of the stair that was just a stair now, and he was not surprised to find that he was not the only one who had come. Fleur was there sitting on the old crate with a globe of blue flame at her shoulder, and Wednesday was there cross-legged on the cold stone, thing beside her and between them on the flagstone where a dead swift had once been laid out neat and cold on a windowsill a whole lifetime ago. Someone had set a single white flower, alive, growing impossibly out of a crack in the ancient stone in the cold, in the dark, where nothing should grow and something did anyway. Wednesday put it there, Fleur said. For the warder, she will deny it. I will deny it, Wednesday confirmed. It's sentimental and beneath me, and I did it at 3 a.m. so no one would see. She looked at the small white flower growing in the dark. It's a graveyard variety. It only blooms in the cold, in the places nobody else will go, and it doesn't stop being beautiful just because the ground it grows in is terrible. She glanced up at Harry, flat and grave, and underneath, entirely warm. I thought of all three of us when I looked at it. I've told you what it means so you don't have to guess. Harry came and sat down on the cold floor between them, in the dark, above a deep that held nothing now but old stone and a kept promise, and Fleur passed the thermos, and it was still French and still better than his, and the three of them sat together at the mouth of the stair where the whole strange dazzling war of the year had started, and none of them was trying to win any more, and none of them was trying to keep the others, and the small white flower burned pale in the dark like a thing that had decided. Against all sense to bloom, Chapter 7 end.